Chapter 1091. This shout attracted everyone's attention. Soon everyone found a faint shadow on the big tree. If it wasn't Bei Guku who had just disappeared, who else could it be? Bei Xian did not expect that he would still be discovered even though he had used everything he could and even increased his speed. At this moment he suddenly had a bad feeling. He was afraid that not only would he fail to kill his target this time, but he might also be in danger. Knowing that both of his companions had been captured, he had to leave. At least he had to report what happened here to the higher-ups so that they could make some preparations. Therefore he had to leave. Since his position had been exposed, Bei Xian did not need to use any fancy means to hide his whereabouts. He simply jumped from this tree to a nearby tree looking like a gibbon. "Chase, we can't let him escape." Beta Persei saw that Bei Xian wanted to escape. He angrily took out a Type 54 pistol from his waist and prepared to lead his men into the dense forest. No need. Beta Persei, who was about to leave, was suddenly stopped by someone. He was just about to curse when he saw that the person who stopped him was Yang Chendong. He stood there obediently. Then the young master's voice clearly entered his ears. "Don't worry, he can't run away." Yang Chendong said this because he had discovered something. With his powerful 5 senses, he had already heard footsteps coming from the dense forest, and there was more than one. Although those people were very careful, Yang Chendong still caught them. Since they could appear here at this time, they should not be enemies. Otherwise, they would have attacked them instead of choosing to be defeated one by one. There was only one possibility left, and that was the Langya Special Forces who had rushed here after seeing the signal flare. There were 200 Langya Special Forces just to deal with a ninja in the forest where they were best at. Yang Chendong really had no reason to think that they could not catch him. What he had to do now was to stand there and wait for news. In less than a quarter of an hour, the sound of footsteps came from the dense forest. A burly man appeared in the lead. It was King Kong of the Wolf Fang. "Greetings, Liu Bai. We have already caught him. He is very fast and agile." Without any other choice, the team members could only use the crossbow. Both of his legs were pierced through. As soon as King Kong appeared, he gave a simple report of the situation. Then 2 members of the team threw North Village entrance who had been shot in both legs, onto the ground like dragging a dead dog. Hee hee. Seeing that the last killer was taken down, Yang Chendong was very happy. "Thank you for your hard work, brothers. Now do one more thing. Pull out all their molars immediately." Yang Chendong, who has long known the habits of ninjas, will never give the 3 people a chance to commit suicide. They are of great use. Their role was no less than that of an army of thousands. How could he let them die so easily? Yu Suzuki and the other 2 did have poison hidden in their mouths, which was used to commit suicide at the most critical moment. But because the matter hasn't reached the final moment, they still want to take the opportunity to see if they can escape, so no one thought of committing suicide. Who would have thought that Yang Chendong, who was clear about all of this, would make the first move and take away their last chance to commit suicide? At this point, the 3 of them had become meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. The interrogation was handed over to Beta Persei. Yang Chendong took Junko's hand and returned to the 5-star Army's camp under the protection of Chiu Vi and the others. The 3 special ninjas were all captured by Yang Chendong. Especially after Xiao Lin, who was in the crowd, recognized the identities of the 3 people. The extent of the 6th young master's strength had become a mystery. Everyone only knows that if it's a one-on-one battle, no one can last more than 3 rounds against the 6th young master, and most people can't even last 1 round. They are also proud to have such a powerful leader. These days, Matsumoto Kazuma's life has not been good. He has undergone inhuman ninja training since he was a child. Not only is his physical fitness excellent, but even his mentality is also very good. But for some reason he has been suffering from insomnia these days. This is something that has never happened to him since he was a child. The 3 people in the North Village haven't sent back a message until now. Especially recently, they haven't sent back a single message, so he can't help but think about it. If he didn't consider the strength of the 3 people in the North Village, he would have thought that something happened to them. Will something really happen to them? After the problem appeared, Matsumoto Kazuma asked himself in his heart. It shouldn't be. The thought just appeared in his mind, but it was rejected by himself. The strength of these 3 people is comparable to his own. It's because he knows them too well that Matsumoto Kazuma doesn't believe that anyone can control them. Not to mention that the three people are very powerful special ninjas. If it's not the right time, they will never easily make a move. With the ability of the three of them, it's impossible for all of them to be caught. At least one or two of them can escape. It's because he knows them too well that Matsumoto Kazuma is so confident. If it's another commander, they may have already prepared for the worst. Matsumoto Kazuma has his own ideas and persistence, and even the pride of a ninja in his heart. As a parasitic ninja who has always been attached to other forces, he has always had an idea, that is, he hopes that one day he can break all the shackles, no longer rely on others, and he can stand on his own and stand alone. For this goal, I don't know how many seniors have worked hard and struggled for a lifetime, but in the end no one has been able to do it. All of this has a lot to do with the special training of ninja. To become a qualified ninja, it takes not only hard work and effort, but also a mentality that requires one to be undistracted, not to be disturbed by everything, and to be able to devote oneself to it wholeheartedly. Only in this way can a truly excellent ninja be trained. It's just that people eat grains. How can they have no feelings and don't come into contact with worldly things? Just like ninjas, although their physical fitness is different from ordinary people, they still have to eat after all. They are not ascetics. In order to ensure physical coordination and absolute health, their requirements for food will only be higher. Otherwise, how can a malnourished person be trained for nearly 8 hours a day? And all of this requires money, a lot of money. And training ninja also requires a process, and for some people this process is still very long. This has led to the fact that this is an industry with a large investment and slow results, and there are very few people who are interested in it. There are even fewer people who are interested and have enough financial strength and patience. This is also the reason why, with the financial resources of the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he can only train 4 special ninjas, and the entire Japanese Empire only has 5 special ninjas. It's really because the external conditions don't allow it, and it's not that ninjas don't have to do their best. It is precisely because the number of suitable ninjas is too small that they have become even weaker, so that they don't have enough confidence to speak in the face of any forces. In order to change this situation, Matsumoto Kazuma took the initiative to take the task of assassinating Yang Chendong, in order to make a bang so that everyone can see the power of their ninja. But it was apparent that things weren't going as smoothly as he imagined. In order to save the ninja's face, Matsumoto Kazuma didn't dare to tell the Supreme General about the loss of contact with the Kitamura trio. In the face of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's urging several times, he didn't tell the truth. Perhaps because there is no progress, or perhaps because Matsumoto Kazuma's lack of confidence was seen in the eyes of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Gradually he stopped putting his hope in the ninja, and didn't do anything to urge him. But the more this is the case, the more uncomfortable Matsumoto Kazuma's mood became. He felt a sense of abandonment. When a person is no longer valued by others and becomes a dispensable existence, all his dreams and ambitions will only get further and further away from the day of realization, so much so that Matsumoto Fujima became somewhat decadent, giving up the principles of ninja and drinking all day long. On this day, Matsumoto Kazuma woke up drunk. Slowly opening his eyes, he found that he fell asleep in the hall. He couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. When did he become like this? Where did the previous righteous Matsumoto Kazuma go? He wanted to cheer up again, but when he thought of the Kitamura trio in his mind, there was no news, not even a little bit of news. The feeling of wanting to cheer up disappeared. Something really happened to them. Would he be able to lead the ninjas to stand up again? If even the strongest ninja can't complete the task, then what hope does this organization have? What's the point of standing in this world? Shaking his head, Matsumoto Kazuma took a bottle of wine and poured it into his mouth. He wanted to use alcohol to comfort his wounded soul. Although the degree of wine in the Japanese Empire is not high, for him who has no experience in drinking, it is enough to numb his nerves. After pouring a third of the bottle of wine into his mouth, Matsumoto Kazuma felt a slightly spicy taste. The corner of his mouth revealed a satisfied smile. He really didn't know what else to do besides drinking. Clang. The loud sound of the door opening aroused Matsumoto Kazuma's vigilance. This is the ninja courtyard. According to the ninja's behavior, even the lowest genin walks quietly. It is absolutely impossible to make such a big noise when opening the door. This noise also attracted Matsumoto Kazuma's attention. Just when he was about to get up and go outside to see what is going on, the sound of sword clashing entered his ears, and then the door of his bedroom was pushed open and 4 ninjas rushed in. Kun Matsumoto, we are surrounded. It is the Supreme General's samurai team. Some of our companions have died in the courtyard. You should leave quickly. Chapter 1092. The Great General's Samurai Team? Matsumoto Kazuma's face changed. They are the elites of the Great General's Guard. How many people have tried to assassinate Ashikaga Yoshimasa, but they have been saved by this team and they have become the same trump card as the ninja team. It's just that the former is more suitable for defense, and the ninja are more suitable for assassination. Originally, these two lines don't intersect, one in the light and the other in the dark. But why would these samurai attack the ninja? Even if he disappointed the Great General, he shouldn't send people to deal with him, right? What exactly had happened that he didn't know about? The doubts on Matsumoto Kazuma's face were seen in the eyes of the four jonins, and they became even more anxious. The samurai's movements were very fast. Coupled with their preparation, the ninja's team had already suffered a lot. If they don't escape in time, I'm afraid they won't even have the chance to leave this place. One of the jonins was so anxious that he ignored Matsumoto Kazuma, who was still immersed in his fantasy, and took the initiative to step forward and grabbed his arm and said, "Kun Matsumoto, leave here first. As long as you are still alive, there is still hope for our ninja." Yes. The other three jonins also made a sound and tried their best to cooperate. "No, I won't go. I want to have a good talk with them. Why do they want to attack our ninja? Does the Great General know about this?" Matsumoto Kazuma's temper rose. He thought that the samurai team's actions were private, because ninja and samurai are usually opposite, and the two sides have not seen eye to eye for a long time. He has reason to suspect that these actions are to vent their anger, because as long as the Great General is not stupid, he should know that there is no benefit in killing him, and on the contrary, it will make the opponent laugh secretly. This kind of thing that hurts the family and makes the enemy happy. Matsumoto Kazuma doesn't believe that the Great General will do it, so he went out to reason with the people who came. For this reason, he even broke away from the outstretched arm of the jonin on the side, pushed open the bedroom door and walked out. The courtyard that belongs to the ninja has long been designated as a training base, so the area here is not small. At this moment, the people here have long been fighting in a group. There are ninja corpses everywhere, and the air has long been filled with a pungent smell of blood. When Matsumoto Fuma walked out, he saw this scene. He also happened to see a samurai holding a bushido and slashing at a genin. Out of instinct to protect his companions, he jumped out and kicked the samurai's wrist, forcing him to retreat, and then he shouted, "What are you doing? Who gave you the right to attack? Kun Matsumoto, are you finally willing to come out?" The short silence was broken by a burst of laughter. A man who is slightly taller than the ordinary people of the Japanese Empire walked out of the crowd. He is 1.78 meters tall and has a strong aura. His appearance is very dazzling for the people who are less than 1.7 meters tall. The man walked out in large strides, and when Matsumoto Kazuma saw him, he couldn't help but stare at him and said, "Yamaguchi-kun, you came in person?" Yamaguchi Fukada, Ninja General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's bodyguard, and also the captain of the samurai team. He is one of the most trusted people of the ninja general. Oftentimes his appearance and actions could directly represent the Supreme General, which was why Matsumoto Fuma was so surprised. Looking at Yamaguchi Fukada, Matsumoto Kazuma couldn't help but think, is all of this really the ninja general's idea? Yes, I came in person. Since Kun Matsumoto is here, can you ask your ninjas to stop first? I also know that you must have a lot of questions, so you can come with me to see the ninja general, and if you have any questions you can talk to him face to face. Yamaguchi Fukada said with a very reasonable appearance, and his words were full of consideration for the other party. These words moved Matsumoto Kazuma. Although he is very sad about the hundreds of ninjas who have fallen to the ground and died, he wants to know the reason. So after hearing these words, he bowed deeply to Yamaguchi Fukada, who is more than 10 meters away, and said, "Thank you, Yamaguchi-in. Since that is the case, I am willing to go with you to see the ninja general and make things clear." "Kun Matsumoto, you can't." The four jonin behind him shouted anxiously. Since the samurai has already made a move on the ninjas, this is originally the result of a fight to the death. How can they easily believe the other party? "Enough, don't say anymore. I believe in Yamaguchi-kun's character. I am willing to go with them to see the ninja general." Matsumoto Kazuma waved his hand. In order to show his sincerity, he also took out his ninja sword and handed it to a jonin behind him, then turned around to show that he has no more weapons. Matsumoto Kazuma's sincerity is already full, but Yamaguchi Fukada on the opposite side seems to be not satisfied. Instead he said, "And the medicine bottle on your body, take it out. I don't want you to go to the ninja general and play tricks." The so-called medicine bottle refers to the auxiliary substance used by ninjas to perform ecstasy jutsu and other means. Just like a cloud of smoke, the ninja will disappear. This is the function of the medicine bottle. The thing inside can make light have a certain chemical reaction for a while, thus achieving the goal of helping them escape. Since they are old rivals, how can Yamaguchi Fukada not know what other things Matsumoto Kazuma has? So he said, "Okay, I will hand them all over." Matsumoto Kazuma was very cooperative, took out a porcelain bottle from his body, and handed it to the person holding the sword behind him. Then he looked at Yamaguchi Fukada in the distance and said, "Now there is no problem, right? You can take me to see the ninja general." "Kun Matsumoto, please." Seeing the other party so cooperative, Yamaguchi Fukada nodded with satisfaction, then made a sideways movement to lead the way. "Please." Matsumoto Kazuma said so very politely, then strode forward, straight toward Yamaguchi Fukada's position. His action also attracted the attention of the ninjas present. On the surface, Matsumoto Kazuma looked relaxed, but with every step he took he was ready to make a move at any time. What he was thinking was not as simple as what he showed on the surface. Even at this moment his whole body was tense. With a smile on his face, Yamaguchi Fukada let Matsumoto Kazuma approach. Until the distance between the two sides was only 1 meter, he still didn't have any intention to make a move. Instead he turned around and really wanted to take him to see the ninja general. "All samurai, listen to my order. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack anyone." "Yes." The hundreds of samurai who had arrived all nodded in agreement. Then one by one they held their samurai swords in their hands. "Thank you." Seeing that Yamaguchi Fukada was so trustworthy, Matsumoto Kazuma also breathed a sigh of relief. Then he also shouted loudly, "All ninjas, listen to my order. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack anyone." "Yes." Hundreds of ninjas also responded in unison, each put down the katana in their hands, and some of the injured ninjas simply sat on the ground, then called their companions to bandage their wounds. After Matsumoto Kazuma did this, he looked at Yamaguchi Fukada and said, "Yamaguchi-kun, I will have to trouble you to lead the way. You're too polite, please. By the way, Kun Matsumoto, do you know why the ninja general ordered you to be taught a lesson?" Yamaguchi Fukada asked with a meaningful smile on his face. Why? This was the question in his heart at this moment. Matsumoto Kazuma was really too curious. "Well, I'll tell you." Yamaguchi Fukada stopped moving forward, turned around, approached Matsumoto Kazuma, and then looked like he wanted to whisper something. Cooperating with the other party, Matsumoto Kazuma also leaned his head over. He also wanted to hear what was going on. If he didn't solve this mystery, even if he saw the ninja general, he wouldn't know what to say. He leaned his head over, but because his head was lowered, he didn't notice the flash of pride in Yamaguchi Fukada's eyes. When the distance between the two people was infinitely close, suddenly there was a pain in his waist. At this moment, a katana was stabbed into Matsumoto Kazuma's waist, and blood quickly dripped down along the blade. Yamaguchi Fukada suddenly made a move, showing the neon people's untrustworthiness, insidious and cunning. His men who had already put down their katanas also made a move. They didn't even need anyone to give the order. The sharp blades slashed at the ninjas who had already aimed at them. This sudden turn of events was out of everyone's expectations. Most of the ninjas were still sitting on the ground or enjoying the help of their companions, but they were already killed by the katana. The situation instantly became one-sided. In just a few breaths, no less than dozens of ninjas were killed because they were unprepared. Why is this? Matsumoto Fujita covered the katana on his waist and stared at Yamaguchi Fujita in front of him with a pair of disbelieving eyes. Why? At this moment Yamaguchi Fukada no longer had a smile on his face, but returned to a cold state and said, "Because of the incompetence of your ninjas, the assassination failed, and you were captured alive. Now the 5-star army has declared war on the Supreme General. Now their vanguard army is about to reach Ping in Beijing, and this place is about to fall into the hands of others. With such a big mistake, do you think the Supreme General will forgive you? Why do you think this is?" In a short period of time, Yamaguchi Fukada continuously threw out so many questions and truths, making Matsumoto Kazuma stand there for a while. He was at a loss. The assassination of the 3 ninjas at the north entrance of the village really failed, but why were they captured alive? Even if they couldn't escape, they should have died. Their teeth are highly poisonous. How could they be captured alive? Chapter 1093. After telling the answer, Yamaguchi Fukada looked at his old opponent Matsumoto Kazuma's painful expression and couldn't help but laugh proudly. This time he didn't only want his opponent's life, but he also wanted his opponent's despair. Only in this way can he be considered to have defeated his opponent. After laughing, Yamaguchi Fukada once again raised the butcher's knife in his hand. Looking at his appearance, it was clear that he wanted to continue to chop down and end his opponent's life. Couldn't Matsumoto quickly leave? A figure suddenly rushed over, and when the knife fell, it was chopped on the figure. Looking carefully, it was one of the 4 ninjas who persuaded Kuroto to leave. He used his body to block the knife, giving Matsumoto Kazuma a glimmer of hope to survive. The knife fell, but it didn't hit Matsumoto Kazuma's body. Yamaguchi Fukada's eyes showed a trace of anger. He pulled out the knife and slashed again, but he lost the opportunity to kill because the other 3 ninjas rushed over. 2 of them waved their swords to block the knife, and the other ninja carried the stunned Matsumoto Kazuma and jumped toward the courtyard. Obviously he wanted to take him away from here. Want to leave? Yamaguchi Fukada's face didn't show any panic. Obviously he was very familiar with ninjas, so he was already prepared. He smiled and waved his right hand. The moment he waved his hand, 200 shadows suddenly appeared around the courtyard. They were wearing samurai clothes and they were holding strong bows and crossbows in their hands. Their standard and uniform movements proved that they were a well-trained army. When 200 shadows appeared, many ninjas' eyes showed a look of horror. Some people couldn't help but shout, "My God, Divine Archery Battalion!" The Divine Archery Battalion was composed of the best archers in the Japanese army. They not only have nearly 100% accuracy in archery, but also undergo strict physical training. According to the founder of this army, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, this army must be able to use bows and arrows, and use swords to kill the enemy. The requirements were too harsh, so it has been established for a long time, but the number of people has not been very sufficient, only 500. It became a trump card in the hands of the general, and he won't act rashly. What Kuroto didn't expect is that this time, in order to deal with ninjas, he actually dispatched 200 people. It seems that this time Kuroto is really angry and he wants to destroy this ninja unit that he used to be proud of. When he saw that it was the Divine Archery Battalion, Matsumoto Kazuma, who had a knife in his stomach, stopped the idea of continuing to escape. Originally he was injured and it was difficult for him to move, so the chance of escaping was very slim. Now there were fully prepared divine archers on the periphery. Doesn't this mean that the inescapable net has been set up? And even if he wanted to escape, there would be no chance for him to escape. Instead of being killed while escaping, it was better to stay and fight and die together with his brothers. At least he can gain a reputation for loyalty. Matsumoto Kazuma pulled back his hand and said to the jonin who was helping him to leave, "Forget it, there is no chance. It is better to fight with all our strength and kill a few more people is equivalent to revenge for our brothers." The jonin didn't speak. At this moment he didn't know what to say. Yes, since the Divine Archery Battalion has appeared, how can there be a chance for them to escape? Since he was going to die, he might as well go all out before he died. One was an injured special ninja and the other was a jonin. The 2 were holding ninja swords back to back. They relied on each other, but at the same time they also turned their backs to each other. They were ready to kill the enemy at any time. Matsumoto Kazuma stopped running and Yamaguchi Fukada laughed proudly. Is this old opponent finally going to accept his fate? Does he really think that death will be so easy? No. He wants to watch this old opponent die step by step. Even if he dies, he won't let this old enemy die easily. Yamaguchi Fukada, who was laughing, showed a gloomy look on his face. After that he made a gesture, and most of the 200 soldiers of the Divine Archery Battalion adjusted the angle and target of their arrows, leaving only 20 people to stare at Matsumoto Kazuma. Matsumoto Kazuma saw the excitement of the soldiers of the Divine Archery Battalion, and he had a bad feeling, so he exclaimed loudly, "No. Don't. As if to confirm his guess, as soon as his shout fell, hundreds of arrows broke through the air and shot toward those ninjas who were desperately resisting in the courtyard. Originally, they were in a disadvantageous position. After being attacked suddenly and being schemed by Yamaguchi Fukada, the number of ninjas has sharply decreased, and only 1/3 of their strength was left. The arrival of this wave of arrows accelerated the process of their death. Especially in front of them, there were samurai who were entangled with them, so they couldn't do anything to dodge. Many ninjas were killed by the arrows. The archers of the Divine Archery Battalion were worthy of their title. Every arrow was shot with a very clear target, and they could bypass the samurai and hit the ninjas. They were either killed by an arrow in a vital part of their body or pierced into their arms or legs, reducing their mobility and agility. With just one wave of arrows, at least 50 ninjas died tragically on the ground, and dozens of others suffered different degrees of injuries. This made the situation worse for the ninjas, who were already in a bad situation, and even their resistance became weaker. No. Don't. I'll fight with you. Watching the ninjas he trained hard and his companions who have been with him for many years being shot one by one under his eyes, Matsumoto Fuma's eyes were red, as if they were about to spit out flames. He wanted to kill all the enemies. In anger, Matsumoto Kazuma completely ignored the knife wound on his abdomen. Even if he was injured, a special ninja was still a special ninja. Like a cold wind, he killed his way into the samurai who were showing off their might, and then stabbed his sword to the left and right. One by one, the samurai who were unprepared or who were prepared but had no power to fight back, became sheep in the lion's mouth, became the target, and were stabbed to death on the ground. Originally, he had a face full of laughter, imagining how painful it would be for Matsumoto Kazuma to watch his subordinates and companions die one by one. Suddenly, when he saw this person move and kill several of his subordinates, the smile on his face disappeared, and was replaced by anxiety and anger. A person who was about to die, an ant that he could trample to death at any time, dared to resist. This was unacceptable. Yamaguchi Fukada roared, and then rushed toward Matsumoto Kazuma with his sword. At the same time, he didn't forget to make a shooting gesture toward the surrounding walls. The expressions of the 20-God Arrow Battalion and the Master Archers were also very ugly. Originally, they thought that Matsumoto Kazuma was already a fat piece of meat on the chopping board, and they could decide his life and death as they wished. But they didn't expect that he dared to resist, and in such a short time he even killed 2 samurai. This was simply a provocation to their archery skills. Release the arrows. A captain couldn't help but shout in his heart, and the arrows of the 20 master archers also moved along with Matsumoto Kazuma's movements. The advantage of ninjas was their flexibility and the strangeness of their figure. When it came to face-to-face combat, they were not as good as samurai. This was also the reason why ninjas were always suppressed in a head-on battle. But when they were able to fully exert their advantages, like Matsumoto Kazuma now, who was constantly moving among the samurai like a civet, it was impossible to completely capture his figure. The archers finally found a chance to shoot a few arrows, but not only did most of them miss, but one arrow even hit a samurai's body, accidentally injuring one of their own. Matsumoto Kazuma's speed was so fast that it was beyond his usual level. He also saw that the wound on his lower abdomen was constantly dripping blood, and he knew that if this continued, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to live long, even if others didn't kill him. Since he knew that he was going to die, what was there to be afraid of? He just had to give it his all and kill as many people as he could. It could also be considered as an explanation to his brothers as a captain. At least if they could be together after death, he wouldn't be ashamed of anyone. Matsumoto Kazuma, who was close to madness, became synonymous with the Grim Reaper. Wherever he passed, samurai fell to the ground. Most people only saw a shadow appear and then they felt a pain in their body and lost their senses forever. Because of Matsumoto Kazuma, the courtyard became more and more chaotic. Originally, it was only a one-sided battle, but now it became a situation where everyone could become prey. At this moment, on another high wall 500 meters away from the courtyard, a group of black-clothed men were lying there, as if they were a layer of black tiles on the roof of the courtyard. If it wasn't for someone speaking at this time, no one would be able to tell that everything in front of them was made of human bodies. "General, please save our comrades and our captain, he's about to die." With an anxious expression, Chuishiki used his binoculars to see everything clearly, and finally couldn't hold it in and begged. At this moment Chuashiki wasn't interested in asking what the binoculars in his hands were, or how it could close the distance between them. Right now he only wanted the people around him to help and save Matsumoto Kazuma and his brothers. That's right, General, please act quickly. As long as you can save our captain and comrades, I'm willing to swear that I'll be loyal to Bugnam of Gojoseon for the rest of my life. Yu Suzuki also spoke. Compared to Chuashiki, he was willing to swear his loyalty. Other than Kitamura, who was still recovering from his leg injury, Yu Suzuki and Chuashiki, who hadn't fully recovered from their shoulder injuries, were also here. The reason why they were here was all because of Yang Chendong. Chapter 1094. The ambush at the foot of the mountain not only failed to kill Yang Chendong, but even Long Wei, who was beside him, was not killed, only 2 of them were slightly injured. In exchange, 2 of the special ninjas were injured and 1 was captured. In the end, all 3 of them were captured alive. After the 3 of them were captured, Yang Chendong first handed them over to Beta Persei. He believed that with the interrogation and torture methods he and Beta Persei had learned, it wouldn't take long for the 3 of them to suffer a fate worse than death. They would forever regret the moment when they had the idea to attack him. But things were always unexpected. Princess Junko suddenly came to his door. After there was no one else in the tent, she knelt on the ground in front of Yang Chendong's puzzled eyes. She knelt in front of her husband. "Madam, why are you doing this?" Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with doubts. He thought that he knew this student whom he had known for several years very well, but at this moment he was also stunned by Junko's sudden action. "King." After hearing Yang Chendong's unique name, Junko slowly raised her head. "King Junko begs you, don't kill those 3 people. They are the best talents of the Japanese Empire. They should be used by King and they shouldn't die in silence like this." Junko actually wanted to save the 3 special ninjas, which was really beyond Yang Chendong's expectation. As far as he knew, when the emperor was still in power, these special ninjas gave him a lot of problems, and he didn't even know how many times they had opposed him. They were supposed to be enemies, so why would she plead for mercy for the other party? Yang Chendong's doubts were seen by Junko and she actually smiled and said, "King, Junko really hates them. But it's even more clear that they are just following orders. Junko's real enemy is Ashikaga Yoshimasa. In order to achieve this goal, other people can be used and cooperated with." She even said something like making use of him. It can be seen that she was indeed standing on Yang Chendong's side, and she even forgot her identity as the princess of the Japanese Empire. These days, with Junko's understanding of the 5-star army gradually deepened, especially after seeing the bravery of the 1st Cavalry Division. Although she was unwilling, she had to make a judgment. The 5-star army was too strong. It was so strong that the disordered Japanese Empire couldn't stop it. If the Japanese Empire was truly unified in the hands of her father, with a strong military base, she would still fight against him. But now, the Neon people's minds were in chaos, and there was constant fighting among the higher-ups. More than half of their strength had been consumed, and now Neon was more fragile than ever. In the face of the powerful 5-star army, defeat was certain. It was just a matter of time. The result was already decided. Junko was a smart person. Since she was a little emperor, she had never done anything that went against the heavens. What she thought about was how to maximize the benefits, how to turn all the disadvantages into advantages. Even if she knew that the rise of the 5-star army was inevitable, how to preserve the strength of the Japanese Empire became something she must consider. Although she didn't dare to have extravagant hopes of reviving her country, she didn't dare to imagine that even if Yang Chendong had become her man. As a person who was born in a country where women's rights weren't valued, she had such thoughts and awareness since she was a child. It didn't matter if she couldn't revive her country, she didn't dare to force it. What she wanted was to leave more seeds for the Japanese Empire, leave more marks. At least when people talked about it, the future generations would know that there was a Japanese Empire in the past, and that was enough. To achieve this goal, the spread of ninjas was undoubtedly the key. In a sense, when people talked about ninjas, they would naturally mention the Japanese Empire, and that was enough. In order to achieve this goal, the 3 special ninjas under the rock couldn't die. This was the reason why she came to see Yang Chendong, and she didn't hesitate to kneel down as soon as they met to achieve this goal. Junko opened her mouth to plead for mercy for the 3 special ninjas, which was somewhat beyond Yang Qindong's expectation. Confucius said that only villains and women were difficult to raise. One of the meanings was that women were often emotional creatures. Logic had little effect on them and they were often more used to acting on their emotions. With this point in mind, Yang Qindong never thought that Junko would plead for mercy for any of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's subordinates. Even if the death of her father's family wasn't directly related to those people, there was always an indirect relationship. It would be good if she didn't come to beg him to kill all of them. How could she plead for mercy for them? Junko's abnormal behavior also attracted Yang Qindong's attention. He discovered that he had been underestimating this woman. She was really worthy of being born in the imperial family. Her behavior was really different from others. This move also successfully attracted Yang Qindong's attention. She was even willing to let go of her father's death. Such a woman really made people vigilant. Madam Hachi, what are you doing? Do you want to use them for yourself? Yang Qindong asked bluntly without any probing. He directly spoke out his thoughts. When the words came out, Junko's face suddenly stiffened. She knew that her behavior was misunderstood. She also knew that once Yang Qindong had a bad opinion of her, she was afraid that she would never be happy. Even if it was for herself, she had to explain clearly. "My king, I don't want to use them for myself. Since I gave you my body, I have paid all my feelings. I just want to be the 8th madam and I don't have any thoughts or desires. If my king doesn't believe me, you can send someone to send me away now. I promise that I won't complain." Junko raised her head and looked at Yang Qindong with a very firm look, expressing her feelings. The two of them stared at each other in this way. At this moment, Yang Qindong seemed to be able to see Junko's heart through her eyes. This scene lasted for about 3 or 4 breaths of time. Finally, Yang Qindong took the lead to turn his head to the side. He didn't want to doubt Junko. He also liked this lovely but ill-fated girl. Whether it was out of pity or affection, he didn't want to give up on her so easily. Therefore, he didn't want to guess her real thoughts. "Well, I believe you for the time being. Then tell me, if you don't want to take them for your own use, what are you trying to do?" Yang Qindong asked. Facing this question, Junko was determined to be honest. She knew that there weren't many chances for her to explain. If she didn't seize this opportunity, she was afraid that she wouldn't have another chance to explain everything and tell her thoughts. "My king, Junko knows that this time the Japanese Empire is doomed. Perhaps it won't be long before the Japanese Empire becomes a province under the 5-star army." Speaking of this, the corner of Junko's mouth couldn't help but twitch slightly. After all, the motherland was about to be destroyed. No one would be happy. But when she thought about how her parents and brother died in the hands of her own people, she thought that even if the Japanese Empire was powerful, it wouldn't be able to escape the sharp sword of the 5-star army. She quickly felt relieved and continued to say, "The Japanese Empire becoming a province under the 5-star army is a good thing for the people. Junko is happy for them." "Oh, you really think so?" Yang Qindong suddenly interrupted and asked. For Junko, who had already become his 8th wife, Yang Qindong didn't want to force her. But today, since they had talked like this, some questions that were usually difficult to ask could be asked clearly. He hoped that through today's conversation, they could completely eliminate the last barrier between them, and become a truly selfless husband and wife. "Yes," Junko said with a very firm tone. "The Japanese Empire becoming a province under the 5-star army is naturally a good thing for the people. They can forever avoid the flames of war and live a peaceful and happy life. This is of course a good thing. It's a good thing for the people, but for the higher-ups of the Japanese Empire, it's not necessarily a good thing," Yang Qindong said again. At the same time, he stared closely at Junko, wanting to see her true thoughts. "That's right, it's not a good thing for the higher-ups. But the royal family has been destroyed, and for Junko there are no higher-ups. Now Junko is not a princess but a commoner, the 8th wife of the king, that's all. Since she wants to be a wife, why does she still care about the ninjas?" Yang Qindong didn't believe Junko easily. Especially this woman was a member of the royal family of the Japanese Empire. The shadow of the future was too big, and he didn't want the country that he worked so hard to build to be stolen by an outsider, even if that person was his wife. When it came to the main topic, Junko didn't have the slightest intention to hide and took the initiative to explain. "Junko just wants to leave a mark on the Japanese Empire, and at the same time, as a former princess, I want to do something for them. Besides, ninjas are a very strong force. In the past, when the emperor was still alive, he once said that ninjas have many branches, but because they can't unite together, they can't use their full strength. My king, if you want to conquer the world and create miracles in the end, wouldn't it be better to have as many strong helpers as possible? Since you can give a chance to the foreign cavalry on the grassland, why can't you give a chance to the ninjas? Junko said all the words in the bottom of her heart, and then looked at Yang Qindong intently. The look in her eyes was very strong. It was obvious that she hoped that Yang Qindong would agree, so that she could do something for the Japanese Empire and live up to her identity as a princess. Even if one day she went to the ground to see her father, she would have something to explain. Yang Qindong didn't answer immediately, but constantly analyzed the pros and cons in his heart. No one knew better than Yang Qindong what the Japanese Empire's people were like. When you were strong, they would kneel down and lick your boots. When you were weak, they would find all kinds of excuses to bully you. Chapter 1095. Yang Qindong didn't like such national characteristics, so he only thought of one way to deal with the so-called ninjas, which was to eliminate them. Completely eliminate them. As long as he killed all these ninjas, there would be no such title in the future. Only then could he rest assured and leave everything to his descendants. However, Junko's words were also not wrong. Why could he tolerate the grassland people joining the five-star army but not the ninjas? Since he knew that the people of the Japanese Empire respected the strong, as long as he was strong enough, he didn't need to worry about them rebelling against him one day. If he was really worried, he could just get rid of them after he conquered the world. Yang Qindong felt that he was in the wrong when dealing with other people, but when it came to the Japanese Empire, he didn't think that there was anything he couldn't do. After a full quarter of an hour of silence, Yang Qindong didn't say anything. Junko was waiting on the side, just like a suspect in a court of law, waiting for the final verdict. Finally, Yang Qindong opened his mouth and looked at Junko. I can agree to your request, but do you have a way to persuade them? This was equivalent to agreeing, so Junko was naturally happy. However, what she said next made Yang Qindong a little dumbfounded. My king, Junko doesn't know how to do it, but the omnipotent king will definitely think of a good way, right? There was no way to explain things and all hope fell on himself. At this moment, Yang Qindong wanted to slap his forehead and sigh, but he didn't. As Junko said, he was the omnipotent king, of course there was nothing that could be difficult for him. Well, if that's the case, I still need Madam's cooperation. You can do this. Yang Qindong quickly thought of a way. Although he couldn't guarantee that it would work, he didn't need these ninjas. With such a preconceived idea, it wasn't difficult to think of a plan. Yang Qindong's idea wasn't that brilliant, but it was very effective. First, he asked Junko to visit the 3 special ninjas as the princess of the Japanese Empire. She wanted to get closer to them and at the same time, express her respect and love for them. During the contact, Junko represented Yang Qindong to express the importance of ninjas and promised to help them develop. After the implementation of the plan, sure enough, the performance of the 3 special ninjas was not as stubborn as before. As I said before, the growth process of a ninja is destined to not be able to distract their attention. They can't be too entangled with the secular world. They can only rely on other rich clans to grow up effectively. Considering that the training process is too long and requires more financial support, it effectively hinders the development of the ninja team. This was also the reason why they were under the control of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Compared to the other forces, this general was very rich. He can only be regarded as very rich, but compared to Yang Qindong's wealth, he can't be compared to him. When Junko said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was willing to provide 5 million silver a year to support the training and development of the ninjas, the 3 were moved. With this money, they won't be disturbed by the secular world, and it won't be long before they can restore the glory of the ninja team. This was a proposal that they couldn't refuse. Of course, if they can be bought with money, then it would be too easy to deal with. In fact, it is precisely because they are not good at scheming, and it has been proven that people with distracting thoughts will not make any progress in their ninja training, so they are more honest and grateful than the average person. Considering that they have always received the kindness of the general, the 3 didn't immediately agree, but told Junko that they want to see Bugnam of Gojoseon before making a decision. This was within Yang Qindong's expectations. No matter how much a person dreamed, they had to learn to bow to reality. When Junko came and said that the 3 special ninjas wanted to see him, he didn't hesitate to agree. From the bottom of his heart, Yang Chendong is still very optimistic about the strength of the ninjas, because even in the future the name of the ninjas is very famous, and they have become the spokesman of the military force of a certain island country. At that time all kinds of high-tech weapons were rampant, but they still have such an influence. It can be seen that their background and lethality are powerful. If they can be subdued, then needless to say they will be a big help. As for whether the people of the Japanese Empire are trustworthy, he naturally has confidence. After subduing them they will not have a chance to rebel. This confidence comes not only from the wealth he has now, but also from his martial strength that has almost reached the level of a grandmaster. From ancient times to the present, it has been mentioned by many people, but there are not many people who have really reached this level of strength. Zhang Sanfeng, the founder of Wudong, is one person, and Yang Chendong undoubtedly has such strength. Even with the faint 5 stars in his body he can go in and out at any time, which is to say he has reached a realm where he can disappear into thin air. This is very mysterious, and Yang Chendong doesn't know why such a thing happened. Unable to understand, he could only attribute all this to luck. Perhaps God hoped that there would be such a person who could spread the spirit of Wuxia and unify the world. Unfortunately, this person had chosen him. In the big tent, Yang Chendong saw the 3 special ninjas under the rock. Among them, Kitamura was carried in a single stretcher. The 2 crossbow wounds on his legs were far from being able to recover in a short time. Fortunately, the treatment was timely, and after careful treatment, there shouldn't be any sequelae. Accompanying Yang Chendong were Junko and Beta Persei. In the face of the 3 special ninjas, 2 of whom have recovered all their strength, Yang Chendong can still face them calmly. From this point one can see the strong confidence in his heart. At the foot of Little Een Mountain, Yang Chendong originally had the ability to take down the 3 people in a short time. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't know whether the other party had a backup plan, he wouldn't have given the other party so many opportunities to show off. Yang Chendong was calm, and even his sitting posture was very relaxed. However, Beta Persei, who was standing beside him, was very nervous. His right hand was already on the sword, and he looked like he was ready to attack at any time. He knew very well that at such a close distance, if something happened, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have a chance to shoot. That being the case, he might as well draw his sword. Since he was following the young master and was responsible for his safety, Beta Persei was naturally very cautious. Outside the main tent, the 2 captains Qiuvi and Dao Shao each led 50 of the most elite Long Wei to guard the tent. If there was any movement in the tent, they would immediately rush in. In this way, Beta Persei's nervousness and Yang Chendong's relaxation formed a sharp contrast. This was not only felt by Suzuki and Yui Suzuki, but also Junko, who didn't know any martial arts, could feel it. But she wasn't afraid at all, because Yang Chendong was by her side and he was her king. As long as her king was there, she instinctively felt a strong sense of security. "You want to see me?" After a brief silence in the main tent, Yang Chendong was the first to break the silence. Yang Chendong spoke in fluent Japanese, which saved Junko the trouble of translating, and he could clearly express his attitude through his tone. "Yes, we want to talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon." Suzuki took on the role of the main negotiator. Speaking of which, his language skills weren't that great, but compared to Yui Suzuki, who was even more taciturn, he was much better. "Then let's talk. Tell me your conditions and requests." Yang Chendong nodded lightly and said casually. But in fact he was the one who took the initiative in the conversation. Yang Chendong intentionally gave the other party a chance to speak, and even put on a serious expression. Finally, after nearly an hour, the 2 sides finally reached an agreement under Yang Chendong's control. This content was also proposed by Yang Chendong. According to Suzuki's idea, they could join the 5-star army and complete some assassination missions that couldn't be exposed. But at the same time they also put forward a request, which was the amount of rewards they could get for completing a mission, and how much training money Yang Chendong would give them every year. Regarding this, Yang Chendong directly shook his head and rejected. He didn't want a cooperative relationship, but a pure relationship of superior and subordinate. In other words, these ninjas could only have one master, and what they wanted to do in the future would be decided by that person, and that person was no doubt himself. Suzuki naturally wouldn't agree to this, and even Yui Suzuki, who had been silent all this time, also shook her head. But then Yang Chendong proposed a plan, and the 2 of them made the final concession. "How about this? Let's make a bet. You promise this king one thing and do it, then this king will bet that your Grand Admiral will make a move on Matsumoto Kazuma. If he doesn't, then not only will I give you 5 million silver, I will also send you safely away and we will be even. Of course, if you lose, I will still give you the 5 million silver, but from then on, you must treat me as your master and listen to my orders. How about it? Yang Qindong smiled as he gave a suggestion. When he finished, Suzuki and Yui Suzuki's eyes widened. It was just a bet, and no matter who won or lost, they would still get 5 million silver. That was 5 million silver, and once they got it, it would be enough to support their development for several years. And the ninja team would also welcome a brand new change and a huge expansion. This kind of bet, as long as one wasn't an idiot, they wouldn't refuse. Okay, we agree. Just by looking at each other, Yui Suzuki could tell that Yui Suzuki was just as tempted as he was, so he agreed on behalf of both of them. Chapter 1096. Just like that, the bet was made. Yang Qindong also told them what he wanted them to do, which was to publicly announce that their assassination attempt on Yang Qindong was ordered by the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and announce it to the entire Japanese empire. Just this? Chuishiki asked in disbelief. Yes. Yang Qindong gave a very certain answer. Originally, the three of them came to assassinate Yang Qindong because of the great general's order, and they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. Furthermore, they were all enemies, so wasn't it normal for them to try to kill each other? They were just telling the truth, so it wasn't a big deal. Therefore, they would be able to get 5 million in funding for the development of the ninjas. No matter how they looked at it, it was a profit. Chuishiki and Yui Suzuki didn't have any reason to refuse, so they agreed immediately. Seeing the two of them agree so quickly, Yang Qindong couldn't help but smirk. He knew that he wasn't far from conquering this powerful ninja force. Because he knew what kind of consequences would come after this matter was announced to the world. Ashikaga Yoshimasa wasn't just a simple martial artist, he was also a political strategist. Even if some things were true, they couldn't be publicly announced. On this point, Yang Qindong and Ashikaga Yoshimasa had the same idea. Chuishiki and Yui Suzuki, on the other hand, were too naive, and they would eventually take the initiative to become Yang Qindong's subordinates. The facts also proved that Yang Qindong's idea was correct. When Chushi and Yui Suzuki suddenly appeared in public and pointed out the fact that they were ordered by the great general to assassinate Emperor Wu Nan of the Ming dynasty. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed. The Lu 4th Division and the Lu 7th Division, who had already arrived at Neon, cooperated with each other and launched an attack on the nearby Pinyin capital from the Sanyang Sek's Bomo area. The 100mm mortars that had been prepared beforehand were fired like raindrops, and they instantly destroyed the first line of defense set up by the great general. The 30,000 Japanese army didn't even see the shadow of the 5-star army, and thousands of people were killed or injured, and then they hurriedly retreated. When the news reached Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was still occupying the flat well field in the Hokuriku, he was furious. Seeing that the largest resistance force in the country was about to be annihilated, the sudden change in the situation in the south caught him off guard. According to the report of the scouts, the 5-star army's attack is very fierce, especially their artillery. How can he defend against an enemy that he can't even see? Under this situation, not only will the 50,000 Japanese Empire's garrison not be able to stop the 5-star army's attack, but the Japanese Empire's capital, Pinyin Beijing, will also be lost. And all of this was caused by the words of the ninja, which directly tore up the agreement between the two sides. At this moment, the great general hated the ninja to the core. At this time, the samurai captain Yamaguchi Fukada stood up and said that the ninja should be taught a lesson, and let others know what the consequences of betraying the great general are. Regarding this, Ashikaga Yoshimasa also nodded in agreement. He also needed a way to vent his anger, and Matsumoto Kazuma was undoubtedly the vent. That's why Yamaguchi Fukada appeared in the ninja compound with 200 elite samurai and Matsumoto Fuma. That's why the ninjas resisted and Matsumoto Fuma went all out. Yang Qindong had long expected that Ashikaga Yoshimasa wouldn't tolerate the betrayal of his subordinates, so he arranged for Tai Hu and Bai Zue, the two captains of Wolf Fong and Ghost Shadow, to sneak into Pinyin Beijing to rescue Matsumoto Kazuma. According to the information obtained from the intelligence department, Matsumoto Kazuma was different from the three special ninjas under the rock. This person had some tricks up his sleeve. If this kind of person was used well, it would naturally save a lot of effort, but if it wasn't used well, he would become a poisonous snake that could bite at any time. Then how to subdue Matsumoto Kazuma would require some brains. At least it wouldn't be as simple as dealing with the 3 special ninjas under the rock. This was the reason why Tai Hu and Baizuo didn't immediately act when they saw the samurai make a move. These 2 captains weren't in a hurry because they had already received orders from the 6th young master. However, Suzuki and Hei Ishikaga couldn't do it. Seeing their commander Matsumoto Kazuma fighting with his life on the line and bleeding profusely, they couldn't bear it and kept begging Tai Hu and Hei Ishikaga. They even swore an oath to be loyal to Bugnam of Gojoseon for generations. Whether it was Suzuki or Hei Ishikaga, they didn't expect that they would lose the bet. The assassination was originally the Supreme General's order, and they were just executing it. In any case, they were already enemies, so it wasn't a big deal to tell the truth. They really didn't think that Ashikaga Yoshimasa would make a move on Matsumoto Kazuma because of this. Isn't this kind of internal strife destroying one's own strength and raising the prestige of others? But regardless of whether they could think it through or not, it really happened. Now they didn't have time to think too much, they just wanted to save Matsumoto Kazuma and save more ninjas. Matsumoto Kazuma was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and he was fighting with all his life's potential. Tai Hu and Baizuo naturally saw this scene clearly. After hearing Hei Ishikaga's words of loyalty, and thinking that they had completed the 6th young master's mission, they finally decided to stop watching and make a move. After all, they still have a mission to save Matsumoto Kazuma and more ninjas. Otherwise, if they die, the meaning of their presence here will be a lot smaller. Sniper, aim at the target and prepare to shoot. Langya, prepare to engage the enemy in close combat and at the same time prepare the medicine. The 2 captains prepared to shoot at the same time. In the courtyard, Matsumoto Kazuma was still desperately trying to stab with his sword. Because the wound on his abdomen was bleeding a lot, he knew that he was going to die here today. Knowing that he was going to die, he wasn't so afraid, he just wanted to kill a few more people before he died, and it can be regarded as revenge for his brothers. Yamaguchi Fukada was watching from the side. He didn't choose to fight with Matsumoto Kazuma. In his view, a dying man is still likely to have great potential. What he needs to do is to wait for the other side to continue to consume his strength, and when he completely has no power to resist, he will kill him to show his strength. Yamaguchi Fukada didn't make a move, which created enough opportunity for Iron Tiger and the others to save Matsumoto Kazuma. In the mainland, more and more ninjas died, and when the situation was about to be settled, suddenly on the roof of the courtyard, several archers tilted their bodies and rolled down from the courtyard wall. The sudden scene made many people very puzzled. What made them even more puzzled was that in just a few breaths of time, close to 10 more master archers threw down the bows that they relied on for survival and laid flat on the roof. No matter how others called out to them, they didn't respond at all. This is clearly the symptom of a person dying. For a time, the other archers also felt that they were in danger. The snipers in the dark continued to shoot, but in front of the archers who were on guard, they were no longer as accurate as before. Everyone was a long-range fighter and they had a natural sense of danger. After several archers dodged the bullets, they finally found that the situation was not right. Not good, there are assassins in the dark and they are very likely to be using weapons similar to firearms. After the captain of the archers dodged a fatal shot, he saw a small hole in the place where he was originally standing, and immediately said with a nervous face, hide in a safe place." The captain of the team finally spoke, and more than 100 archers hurriedly dodged in all directions, each looking for a safe place. "We've been discovered, let's just rush in," Captain Baizuo said with some reluctance. But archers were archers and that kind of perception of danger was innate. He didn't expect to be able to eliminate all of them. As long as they could scare them or even make them retreat, they would be able to save most of the ninjas. Under the protection of the Wolf Fong members, the snipers of the Ghost Shadow continued to approach the courtyard, and from time to time they would fire a shot. Most of them couldn't hit anyone, but the deterrent effect was still very effective. After the silencer was removed, when the gunshots began to sound from time to time, the archers began to retreat. The sudden appearance of the Ghost Shadow and Wolf Fong members also caught the samurai by surprise. The cunning Yamaguchi Fukada saw more and more mysterious people appear, and after taking the lives of several of his samurai from a distance, he knew that this was not a place to stay for long. Looking at Matsumoto Kazuma, who was still waving his sword and overdrawing his life, Yamaguchi Fukada finally didn't take the risk to make a move. In his eyes, Matsumoto Kazuma had lost so much blood. Even if no one did anything to him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. So why take the risk? He immediately waved his hand and led the samurai to retreat, leaving this mess to Tai Hu and Bai Zhuo, who were rushing here. The samurai and the archers retreated very quickly, and the ninja courtyard quickly returned to its previous tranquility. The only difference was that this place was filled with the smell of blood. Even Tai Hu and Bai Zhuo, who were accustomed to this kind of scene, couldn't help but sniffle when they arrived. Okay, hurry up and clean up the battlefield and bring back those who are still breathing for treatment. In a very short time, Tai Hu adapted to the smell here, and then he began to issue orders. Less than 100 ninjas, including Matsumoto Kazuma, were either supported by their companions or directly on the prepared stretchers, and were moved out of the courtyard. The main force of the 5-star army was still on the way to Ping in Beijing, and they met Tai Hu and the others. Yang Qindong also had the opportunity to personally see Matsumoto Kazuma, who was lying on the stretcher with a pale face. Chapter 1097. As soon as they saw Yang Qindong, Chuishi and Yui Suzuki knelt on the ground. They had already heard from Tai Hu and Bai Zhuo that this kind of person who needed treatment due to excessive bleeding could only be treated by the 6th young master and his designated medical team. Although they didn't know what method would be used, they knew that it would cost a lot. The ninjas weren't completely accepted by the 5-star army yet, and they didn't know if the 6th young master would care about them or not. At this moment they could only kneel and beg for mercy, hoping that Bugnam of Gojoseon would help. Their request was naturally accepted. Since Yang Qindong was determined to subdue the ninjas for his own use, how could he watch something happen to Matsumoto Kazuma, a core member of the ninjas? Come, send him to the field hospital, tell them what I said, no matter the cost they must save him. The first Longway's Captain Chiu V hurriedly nodded and led his men to take over the stretcher. Chuishi and Yui Suzuki were left behind. They looked at Yang Qindong with gratitude and knelt on the ground again. The person was sent away for treatment, but most of the ninjas didn't think that Matsumoto Kazuma could be saved. They saw with their own eyes how much blood was flowing out of his body, and how pale and ugly his complexion was. Under their old thinking, they believed that a person's blood was limited. Since so much had been lost, no matter what methods they used, they would not be able to reverse the situation. Didn't they hear Bugnam of Gojoseon say that they must do their best to save him? Didn't he say that he would definitely be cured? There were a lot of ninjas who thought this, and the number was not small. When Chuishi heard these words, he couldn't help but stare back angrily. You have to believe in Bugnam of Gojoseon, and you have to believe that Kun Matsumoto has the strongest will in the world. He will definitely be able to survive. Although he said this, in fact, Chuishi didn't believe that Matsumoto Kazuma would really be fine. He was just doing his best and leaving the rest to fate. For the whole afternoon, nearly 100 ninjas rested in several large tents arranged for them. They were all extremely quiet. This was related to the boring life they had since childhood, and they were also worried about Matsumoto Kazuma's health. For a long time, Matsumoto Kazuma was their leader. No matter what happened, everyone was used to listening to his orders. Now that there was a problem, it was no wonder that everyone was so sad. Some people didn't even know how to face the future. Time passed little by little, the sky gradually darkened, and finally there was movement outside the big tent. Ninja's perception is very strong. As soon as they heard footsteps coming, they walked out of the big tent without anyone calling them. With the help of the torches next to the barracks, they saw that the person who came was a seemingly high-level guard who followed Bugnam of Gojoseon during the day. The person who came was tall and his voice was like thunder. After noticing that all the ninjas, even some of the wounded who were covered with gauze, involuntarily walked out of the big tent, he nodded with satisfaction. This saved him the trouble of notifying them one by one. Hello everyone, my name is Beta Persei. I am Bugnam of Gojoseon's personal guard. I am here on behalf of Bugnam of Gojoseon to inform you that Matsumoto Kazuma has passed the critical period and is fine. Really? After a moment, the ninjas who reacted suddenly became lively. Many of them had a look of joy on their faces, and some of them showed a look of disbelief. For example, Bloashida was one of them. Beta Persei-kun, is Kun Matsumoto really okay? Yes. Beta Persei replied with a very positive tone. Then can we go and see him? Yui Suzuki asked anxiously. Yes, but after all his body hasn't fully recovered, so we can't send too many people at once. You can send 2 representatives to see him first. Beta Persei also knew that if he didn't let people see him, not many people would believe him. The 2 representatives were naturally Bloashita and Suzuki Yu. They represented nearly 100 ninjas and followed Beta Persei to the temporary battlefield hospital. There they saw Matsumoto Kazuma lying on the bed. His face had recovered a lot of color, but he could only lie down. Kun Matsumoto. Bloashita and Suzuki Yu almost cried at the same time, and said with a somewhat choked voice. You're here. After seeing his 2 companions, Matsumoto Kazuma forced a smile, and then wanted to sit up on the bed, but he inadvertently pulled the wound on his abdomen that was just stitched and he couldn't help but grin. All of this was seen by Bloashita and Suzuki Yu, and they quickly stepped forward to help him. Looking at all of this, Beta Persei knew that it was time for him to leave. He said that the visiting time can't be too long, and the patient still needs to rest, then he left first. When only Matsumoto Kazuma and the other 2 were left in the tent, it suddenly became very quiet. The 3 of them closed their eyes and did the same thing. This wasn't praying but sensing. They were sensing the surrounding environment to decide if they could talk about something here. Soon, the 3 of them opened their eyes and nodded to each other. After ensuring that the environment was safe, Matsumoto Kazuma, who was lying on the bed, was the first to ask, "Why am I here? Why are you here?" Because of the lag in the news, Matsumoto Kazuma still didn't know that the 3 of them failed their mission and were captured by Yang Chendong, and were used as an excuse to deal with the Supreme Generalissimo. Right now, Matsumoto Kazuma's mind was still stuck in the scene where he fought with the samurai. Kun Matsumoto, the situation is like this. Bloashita, who was quite eloquent, told him how the 3 of them failed their mission and were captured, and how they reached an agreement with Yang Chendong. Finally, they went to the ninja compound with the elites of the 5-star army to rescue the 3 of them. Matsumoto Kazuma listened carefully at first, but when he heard that the 3 of them were captured, he was surprised. When he heard that he reached an agreement with Bugnam of Gojoseon, he was worried that they would be used. After hearing everything, he finally understood why the Supreme Generalissimo sent Yamaguchi Fukada to attack him with elite samurai and 200 sharpshooters. Matsumoto Kazuma was in charge of the external affairs of the ninja compound, so his understanding of the human heart was much better than Bloashita and Yui Suzuki. Yang Chendong's bet was a conspiracy in his eyes, and it was proven that all of this was beneficial to the development of the 5-star army. Obviously, Matsumoto Kazuma knew everything, but he couldn't say anything. Blame them? He didn't kill the captives, but he respected them and gave them a chance to choose. That was already very benevolent. At least from Matsumoto Kazuma's point of view, if he was in their shoes, he wouldn't let the person who tried to assassinate him live. Also, Yang Chendong only made a simple plan, and the one who really fell for it was the Supreme Generalissimo. If he didn't think of himself as a cautious person, if he trusted him a little more, this kind of fratricide wouldn't have happened. From this matter, it can be seen that everyone didn't trust each other. Under such a foundation, even if the fratricide didn't happen today, it might happen in the future. With a long sigh, Matsumoto Kazuma knew that he lost and lost completely. Now that the other party saved his life and gave him a new lease of life, he didn't seem to have any choice in the future. One was his old boss who wanted to kill him. The other was his new boss who not only saved his life, but also gave him a place to live and a new hope. What choice to make? He should know how to make a decision. But before that, he still hoped to know more about Bugnam of Gojoseon so that he can get more benefits for himself in the future. Bloashita, Suzuki-kun, you've all seen Bugnam of Gojoseon. Tell me about your impression and understanding of him. In the main tent 2 miles away, Beta Persei stood in front of Yang Chendong and handed over the task. Then he asked with a puzzled look, "Young master, why don't you let me stay and listen to what they say? I'm sure I won't be discovered by them." "Oh, do you think that ninja's perception is just for show? I can guarantee that before you get close to the big tent, you will be discovered," Yang Chendong said with a smile. Ninjas are best at sneaky assassinations. The feeling that they can appear at any time is very annoying, making people unable to guard against them. The reason is their perception of the environment. It is precisely because of this instinct that they can avoid all kinds of warnings and appear next to the target without making a sound. Being looked down upon by the young master, Beta Persei was a little unconvinced. Young master, so we just let them be? What if they don't abide by the rules and don't do it according to the bet and want to leave or assassinate you again? They won't. Yang Qindong's answer was firm. In this world, I'm afraid that there are few people who know more about the ninja industry than him. It is precisely because they do what they say, because of this simplicity, that they can persist in training in a boring environment and thus become a terrifying existence. On the contrary, if they have other ideas in their hearts and there are too many conspiracy elements, then they won't have their current achievements. Because of this understanding, Yang Qindong believes that the date of his conversation with Matsumoto Kazuma is not far away. Early the next morning, as soon as Yang Qindong had breakfast, Captain Chiovi came to the main tent and reported to him that Matsumoto Kazuma wanted to meet. Is it that urgent? Yang Qindong smiled after listening, then said to Chiovi, "Let's go, accompany me to patrol inside and outside the barracks." Chapter 1098. Yang Qindong wanted to see Matsumoto Kazuma, but he couldn't be in a hurry. "I can't just go and see you when you want to see me. Wouldn't that be too tasteless?" He was now the great Ming prince. How high was his status? How could anyone see him just because they wanted to? Besides, at this time the appropriate control will also play a positive role in conquering the ninja team, so why not? Yang Qindong was not in a hurry, but the one who was anxious was Matsumoto Kazuma. Seeing that it was already noon and he had even finished eating lunch, but he still didn't see Yang Qindong's figure. He became somewhat anxious. Originally, he was anxious to see Yang Qindong because he wanted to express his attitude. That was, he was willing to accept his loss. Even if he wasn't present when the bet was made, he was still willing to accept everything. But as compensation, he also had to put forward some conditions to fight for more benefits for the ninja team. Matsumoto Kazuma was very confident that Yang Qindong would agree to some of his conditions. This could be seen from the fact that the other party didn't kill the 3 ninjas under the rock. Instead, he arranged for elite forces. Now he even put in a lot of effort to save him. Since the other party valued him so much, if he didn't take the opportunity to put forward some conditions, wouldn't it be a waste of this opportunity? But after not seeing Yang Qindong's figure for a long time, his originally confident heart became somewhat uncertain. That is ninja really that important? At least for the leader of the 5-star army, the Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Zhou Xian, is it really that important? Until the afternoon passed, Matsumoto Kazuma's original confidence was worn down by more than half. When it was time to eat dinner, there was still no news. He even began to doubt his own importance. It was also at this time that dense footsteps came from outside the big tent. Then the curtain of the big tent opened from the outside. A tall figure took the lead to enter, bringing a lot of pressure to Matsumoto Kazuma. The first to enter was Beta Persei. He first looked around, then looked at Matsumoto Kazuma lying on the bed. After he didn't find anything unusual, he nodded with satisfaction. He turned around and respectfully said, "Young master, everything is normal." After his voice fell, Yang Qindong appeared in front of Matsumoto Kazuma with a confident smile. Although he has heard about him for a long time, this is the first time he saw King Wunan of Daemyang. Matsumoto Kazuma carefully observed the other party and found that the other party has a trace of a superior aura. The most important thing is that the confidence in his body seems to be able to infect others, giving people a sense of omnipotence. "Matsumoto, don't you know how to kneel when you see Bugnam of Zhou Xian?" Beta Persei noticed that this person only stared at the young master at this moment and didn't do anything else. He suddenly shouted angrily, and this shout also pulled the other party's thoughts back to reality. "Matsumoto Kazuma greets Bugnam of Zhou Xian." As he spoke, he wanted to get out of bed and salute. "Forget it, you still have injuries on your body, just sit and talk." Yang Qindong casually waved his arm, but it was this movement that seemed to have some kind of magical power, making Matsumoto Kazuma, who wanted to get up, stop and involuntarily say, "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me, I saved you because I don't want to see a talent fall. Also, this king's time is limited, I only have the time for an incense stick to burn to listen to you. I have other military affairs to attend to in a while." Yang Qindong sat down in front of the chair that Beta Persei had brought over. Chiovi behind him also took out an incense stick, lit it and stuck it in the ground, using facts to tell some people that they really only had the time for an incense stick to burn. Such anxiety and such an attitude for a moment, Matsumoto Kazuma, who had a stomach full of words, suddenly didn't know what to say. He wanted to say too much and it was far from being able to express clearly in an incense stick's time. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to play a very important role. If he can't explain his importance, then how can he make conditions? After waiting for a whole day, Matsumoto Kazuma really thought that Yang Qindong was very busy. If he missed today's negotiation, who knows when the next negotiation will be? He and his ninjas can't just wait like this. I have to give in. The facts made Matsumoto Kazuma quickly make a decision. Since time is limited, he can only seize the time to make demands. In order to reach an agreement in a limited time, he has to constantly give in and give up benefits. Bugnam of Gojoseon, Chuashiki-kun and Suzuki-kun said that you are willing to support the development and growth of our ninja training team, right? With a hint of probing tone he said. Although this was originally a fact, he had seen many people who reneged on their debts, not to mention that if Yang Qindong admitted it, then it would be a large expenditure of 5 million silver coins. That's right. Matsumoto Kazuma still wanted to probe, but Yang Qindong had already openly admitted it. After getting an accurate answer, Matsumoto Kazuma was very happy in his heart. Once there is an injection of 5 million silver coins, it is equivalent to having a great financial power. Whether it is high-intensity training or recruiting suitable seedlings, it will not be a problem. But just as this smile hung on his face, Yang Qindong also opened his mouth and said, "The promised 5 million silver coins will not be given to you all at once. In the beginning I will give you 1 million silver coins and then it will be paid in 5 batches within 3 years. During this period, if you complete the task given by this king, there will be additional rewards. But if the task is not completed well or if you are disobedient, then your silver coins will be deducted. Do you agree?" He didn't expect there to be such an additional condition, but Chuashiki-kun didn't say anything before. After being stunned for a moment, Matsumoto Kazuma felt relieved. Now he was at the chopping block and he was the meat on the chopping block. What should he do? Shouldn't it be up to him? At least he didn't deny the 5 million silver coins. This result already made him very satisfied. The time it takes for a stick of incense to burn quickly passed. Yang Qindong did as he said and got up to leave, leaving Matsumoto Kazuma alone on the bed. He was still thinking about what Yang Qindong had said. Arrange a suitable training ground, provide food and gold. Of course, the food will be converted into silver coins and deducted from the 5 million silver coins. In addition, when there is a task to be given, the ninja team must carry it out to the letter. If they succeed, there will be rewards, and if they fail, there will be punishment. All of this was different from what Matsumoto Kazuma had imagined. He wanted to fight for a year without missions to restore the ninja team's strength. But now it seems that he didn't have the opportunity to raise the conditions, and he didn't have the ability to do so. Fortunately, Yang Qindong did what he said. Before he left hundreds of banknotes which added up to exactly 1 million silver coins. Holding these in his hands, Matsumoto Kazuma felt a sense of security in his heart. Yang Qindong put aside the matter of the ninja team. He had done what he should do, and the next development would depend on the ability of the other party. Now his main energy was focused on conquering Ping and Beijing. He wanted to take advantage of the time when Ashikaga Yoshimasa was focusing on conquering the northern land road. Ping and Beijing was not only a simple region, it was also the capital of the Japanese Empire, and the political and economic center of the country. Of course, at this time the Japanese Empire didn't have its own unique culture. Once this place was conquered, it would represent the orthodoxy in a way. In addition, Junko was the princess of the Japanese Empire. When the time came, there would be a lot of people responding to her call, and it would be much easier to deal with Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was being thought of, did not look good. Standing in front of him was Yamaguchi Fukada, whose face was full of shame. This time he didn't complete the task well and didn't bring back Matsumoto Kazuma's body. Afraid of being punished, he kept his head down after entering the room, and didn't dare to raise it again. "Get out, 20 strokes of the cane." A cold voice came out of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's mouth. Yamaguchi Fukada breathed a sigh of relief in his heart and turned to receive his punishment without saying a word. He knew the general's temper. If things went wrong, it was normal for him to be beheaded. This time, 20 strokes of the cane was the lowest punishment. This was not because Ashikaga Yoshimasa had a good temper, but because he was in need of manpower, especially since the ninja team could no longer be used, and the samurai team was abandoned. The number of cards in his hand would only decrease. Yamaguchi Fukada had already rolled out, but Yoshimasa's face still didn't look too good. Originally, he wanted to capture Matsumoto Fujina alive, or at least get his body, and then hand it over to the Pentastar army to get himself out of this matter. But now it seemed that this trump card was gone. He slowly raised his head and fell on the other person in the room. Nin Shijuan, without Matsumoto Kazuma, the negotiation won't be a big problem, right? Nin Shijuan was sitting in the room. When he learned that the five-star army suddenly tore up the agreement and invaded Ping and Beijing, he urgently summoned this person, and wanted to reopen the negotiation and stabilize the five-star army first. But who would have thought that the bargaining chip in his hand was gone, and all hope could only be placed on Nin Shijuan's silver tongue. Nin Shijuan, who was asked this question, frowned first. At this moment he was a little angry in his heart. He had spent a lot of effort to suppress the five-star army through negotiations. He had even paid the price of the entire Shanyang path for this. But now, everything was destroyed because of the general's actions. Since he was the one who destroyed the negotiation first, it was no wonder that the five-star army suddenly attacked. Under the current situation, it was very difficult to stop the five-star army. Ashikaga Yoshimasa did not immediately answer this question. He knew that Nin Shijuan had an idea, so he immediately said, Yamaguchi-kun just said that Matsumoto Kazuma lost too much blood, and I'm afraid that he is already dead. It shouldn't be too difficult to put all the blame on a dead person. Chapter 1099. Sigh. Ning Shidoxu sighed in his heart. He knew that he couldn't avoid this anymore, so he finally said, if Matsumoto Kazuma is really dead, then this matter can be discussed, but we still have to pay a price. If there are no benefits, then I'm afraid that the five-star army won't be able to negotiate. They want benefits? Just give it to them. Ashikaga Yoshimasa became excited. Then he strode to the map on the side. After pondering for a moment, he pointed at the Shanin Road area and said, give this area to the five-star army. This kind of benefit should be able to stop their army from advancing. What? Give the entire Shanin Road to them? This time it was Ning Shidoxu's turn to be shocked. It must be known that in the entire Japanese Empire, there were only 7 districts other than Ping and Beijing. They already gave one to them before, and the five-star army took down another one. Now that they were giving another one, didn't that mean that they had already taken over half of the Japanese Empire's land? Looking at Ning Shidoxu's shocked expression, Ashikaga Yoshimasa smiled with satisfaction. This was the effect he wanted. Presumably, King Wunan of Daimyong would be as shocked as Ning Shidoxu was right now. Yes, give it to them. I'm generous, right? Ashikaga Yoshimasa laughed. He didn't care about Ning Shidoxu's shock at all. Very quickly he gave a reasonable explanation. Right now our main goal is to destroy the Flatwell field. As long as he dies, there will be no resistance in the country. At that time it will be time for us to go back and deal with the five-star army. Before that we need peace. Besides, is the Shanin Road really that easy to take? There are dozens of big and small forces there. There are more than 200,000 soldiers there than the five-star army. If they want to take it down, it won't be something that can be done overnight. Ningshi Duishio finally understood what the great general meant. He let out a sigh of relief and nodded at the same time. He was really afraid that the great general was afraid of the five-star army and wanted to give up all the benefits. Since he already had a plan, he only needed to execute it. With such a big dish like the Shanin path in front of him, he believed that no one would be able to resist the temptation. All right. Please rest assured, great general. Leave everything to me. 3 days later, Ningshi Duishio arrived at the five-star army's tent. This was the second time he came here, so he was very familiar with the place. When he saw Yang Chendong, he first saluted, then explained, and finally threw out the bait. Regarding the assassination, Ningshi Duishio naturally said that all of this was the personal behavior of the ninjas. He and the great general didn't know about it, but in any case, this incident caused losses and shock to the Bugnam of Gojoseon. As compensation, and to show the friendly relationship between the two sides, Ningxi Duoxiu expressed on behalf of the great general that he was willing to give up the Shanin Road to the 5-star army as compensation. Another large area of the Shanin Road was given to him just like that. Yang Qindong felt a little surprised. But then he understood that this wasn't giving him benefits, it was clearly setting a trap for him. Does he really think that he is a 3-year-old child who can be easily fooled? After Ningxi Duoxiu finished speaking, he kept staring at Yang Qindong. He wanted to see what his first reaction would be to make the most correct judgment. In order not to let the other party down, Yang Qindong deliberately pretended to be very interested and greedy. There was even a hint of eagerness in his voice. Is the great general really willing to give the Shanin Road to the 5-star army? Of course, the great general values the friendship between the Bugnam of Zhou Xian. Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to have fallen into his trap, Ningxi Duoxiu was happy in his heart, and at the same time he replied with a very positive tone. Well, thank you very much, great general, but I don't know if this matter can be announced to the world. This can also express the deep friendship between us and the great general. Yang Qindong smiled and made a small request. Since he was going to put on a show, of course he had to go all the way. Ningxi Duoxiu thought that Yang Qindong had fallen into his trap, so he didn't suspect anything and simply agreed. He also said that he would send the document personally written by the great general to the 5-star army's barracks in 7 days at the latest. It was just a handwritten document, but it actually needed 7 days. Ningxi Duoxiu's intention to use this opportunity to stall for time was obvious. But Yang Qindong didn't have the intention to expose him. He also needed time to make some preparations. Ningxi Duoxiu left very satisfied. He didn't know that only half a day after he left, a small team walked out of the 5-star army. They left the barracks and went straight in the direction of the Shanin Road. The person leading the team was the director of the intelligence bureau in the Japanese Empire. Guanxing was following Yang Qindong's orders. This time he was going to see the Japanese Empire's Shanin Road's General Uehara Toda. As the largest military force in the Shanin Road, Uehara Toda had 80,000 soldiers. Such a force could be considered an extremely powerful force even among the ranks of generals. Based on his understanding of the Shanin Road's terrain and environment, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was the local snake. Normally, Uehara Toda and the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't interfere with each other's business. When it came to some big matters, the two sides would cooperate to a limited extent. It was precisely because the great general didn't see him as an enemy that he had to deal with immediately that Uehara Toda's days were really carefree. No matter how the Japanese Empire's civil war was, even if Baiming and Bugnam of Zhou Xian wanted to get a share of the pie, he still wasn't worried at all. He just sat there and watched the situation change as if he had nothing to do with it. In a war, very few people could really stay out of it. Uehara Toda also knew that he had to make a move, but when to choose the right time and how to do it to maximize the benefits, this was what he was looking for. To sum it up, he was waiting for the right price. Sure enough, Uehara Toda, who hadn't made a move until now, would receive all kinds of gifts from the great general from time to time. Gold, silver, treasures, beautiful women, and at the same time, it was also to appease him, hoping that he wouldn't use this opportunity to cause trouble. He fully understood Ashikaga Yoshimasa's intentions. This Uehara Toda really did things according to the rules. The civil war had been going on for almost half a year, but he hadn't sent a single soldier to the battlefield. He was very good at being a spectator watching the situation unfold. On this day, Uehara Toda, who was drinking and enjoying a rare peaceful time in his great general's residence, welcomed a special guest, the 5-star army's messenger Guanxing. Regarding the 5-star army, Uehara Toda's feelings were very conflicted. The reason he was able to obtain all kinds of benefits from the current chaotic situation was because of the 5-star army's sudden intervention. From this point of view, he should thank them. But on the other hand, the 5-star army was still an outsider, and no matter how the Japanese Empire fought, it was still meat in the pot. As a great general of the Japanese Empire, of course, he didn't want to see other people come to his country and take advantage of it. With this kind of love and hate, Uehara Toda hesitated for a moment. Thinking about how powerful the 5-star army was, especially their firearms, he finally decided to meet the other party. If the other party really had a request, as long as it wasn't too excessive, he wouldn't mind agreeing. It was better than provoking a powerful opponent for no reason. In the main hall, Uehara Toda received Guanxing. As soon as they met, he had a smile on his face and showed a very warm appearance. While inviting Guanxing to sit down, he also personally poured a cup of sake for him. This kind of reception, if it was someone else, would really be moved. In Guanxing's eyes, his evaluation of Uehara Toda had to be a bit higher. A man who knew when to bow and submit wasn't afraid of villains, but he was afraid of hypocrites. This person will probably be a stumbling block on the path of the 5-star army in the future. Guanxing, who made a preliminary impression in his heart, smiled and took the sake. His mouth was full of thanks, and the guest and the host gave a very harmonious feeling for a while. After drinking several cups of sake, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be a lot closer, and Guanxing finally talked about business. And when he opened his mouth, he exploded with a bomb. Uehara Toda, do you know that a disaster is about to befall you? Uehara Toda, who was also observing Guanxing and guessing the purpose of the other party's visit, heard this and his face froze. But soon he chuckled and said, "Esteemed envoy, aren't you being a little alarmist? How could there be an imminent disaster?" "What? Doesn't the general know?" Guanxing, who had already thought of all kinds of possible responses, pretended to be surprised and asked with a confident look. "Know what?" Uehara Toda, who was completely driven by the rhythm, had to ask aloud. "It seems that the general really doesn't know. Seeing that we are chatting so well, then I will tell the general. It won't be long before the Yamen Road will be owned by the 5-star army. At that time, I am afraid that the general will lose everything he has." As if he was stating a fact, Guanxing shook his head as he spoke. Uehara Toda's face was a bit unfriendly and he stared at Guanxing and said, "What? Does the 5-star army want to send troops to occupy the Yamen Road?" "Occupy? What do you mean by that?" Guanxing asked with a puzzled expression. "What? Didn't you say that this place will soon be owned by the 5-star army? Then what are you doing if you don't want to occupy it?" If that's the case and you're here to declare war, then I'll accept it. However, the 80,000 troops under my command and the hundreds of thousands of people from other forces are not to be trifled with. The Shanin Road belongs to us Neon people and no one else is allowed to touch it. When he said the last sentence, Uehara Toda showed a domineering side, as if he was not afraid of war, nor was he afraid of the 5-star army. Uehara Toda's fearless performance was seen by Guanxing. This was the result he had expected, so he exclaimed, "What does the general mean? The 5-star army never meant to be the general's enemy. All of this is because the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa promised our Bugnam of Gojoseon." Chapter 1100. Uehara Toda, who was about to continue to fight head-on and show his strong side to make the 5-star army fear him, suddenly heard Guanxing's words. He was stunned for a moment, then he said with a confused expression, "Wait, what did you say just now? You said that everything was the Grand General's idea?" "Yes. It's like this." Guanxing felt that the time was right, so he told Uehara Toda all the promises that Ninjashi Toda made after meeting Bugnam of Gojoseon. In the end, he said, "In a few days the Grand General's handwritten document will be sent to Bugnam of Gojoseon. When the time comes, the Grand General will be able to see whether it's real or not. By the way, the Grand General's handwriting, I'm sure the Grand General can recognize it." These days the two sides have been communicating a lot, and Uehara Toda certainly recognized Ashikaga Yoshimasa's handwriting. However, he did not care about these details. He was thinking about why the Grand General would betray him. Could it be that the Grand General wanted to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight like him? Uehara Toda's mind was in a mess. After Ninjashi Toda returned to the Hokuriku Road and met with Ashikaga Yoshimasa, she told him about her meeting with Yang Chendong. "Grand General, as you expected, Bugnam of Gojoseon was very tempted. This pie is really big. Ha ha ha." At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was in a very good mood. He laughed and said, "There are no eternal enemies and there are no eternal friends. Only interests are eternal. As long as Bugnam of Gojoseon is still a person, it's impossible for him not to be tempted. This is all within my expectations. Yes, the Grand General is mighty." Ninjashi Toda took the opportunity to flatter him. Good. You've done a good job. I'll reward you handsomely. However, there's one more thing I need you to do." Ashikaga Yoshimasa stopped laughing and spoke in a serious tone. Please tell me, Grand General. Ninja Shitoda said with admiration. Ashikaga Yoshimasa said, I'll write a letter. You can send it to the 5-star Army's camp. At the same time, I'll also write a letter to Uehara Toda. I'll have to trouble you to make the trip personally. Ashikaga Yoshimasa was able to become the most powerful official in the Japanese Empire. He was even able to control the royal family. He was not only good at war, he was also good at scheming. Since the 5-star army had been ignited, the next step was to add fuel to the fire of the Japanese army in the Shanin Road. He didn't want the 5-star army to progress too smoothly. What he wanted to see was a scene where the two sides were entangled and mutually damaged. If he pointed the 5-star army's forces at the Shanin area and reminded Uehara Toda to be prepared, there was a high possibility that the 5-star army would be entangled in a battle. Once he dealt with the flat well field, which was the biggest opposition to him, it would be time for him to turn around and work with Uehara Toda to deal with the 5-star army. To deal with foreign aggression, he must first deal with internal problems. This was also Ashikaga Yoshimasa's idea. As long as he destroyed the flat well field and drove away the 5-star army, it would be time for him to deal with Uehara Toda and the others. At that time he would become the emperor of the Japanese Empire. Everyone knew how to calculate, but it was obvious that Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not as good as Yang Chendong. His self-proclaimed masterpiece had long been seen through by others. Waiting for the letter that promised to give the Shanin area to the 5-star army, Yang Chendong arranged for Longwei's second captain, Dao Shao, to lead a group of elites to the north. Inside the shogun's mansion, Nishitoshi also brought the second letter from the shogun and met the owner of the mansion, Uehara Toda. He was still very enthusiastic as he received Ningshi Duishio's group. Although he had Guan Heng's reminder, Uehara Toda did not intend to reject the guests before everything was clear. He wanted to stay out of it. As for how the 5-star army and the shogun would fight, let them do as they pleased as long as they did not drag him into it. Nishitoshi did not know that the messenger of the 5-star army had already rushed over, and did not know that Uehara Toda already knew everything. He even took out the general's handwritten letter as if they were idiots. Then with a face full of hatred he talked about how domineering the 5-star army was. He also said that the general was focusing all his efforts on dealing with Hirai Ida, so he really didn't have the energy to stop the 5-star army. However, his heart was on General Uehara's side, and as long as they held off the 5-star army for a while, the general would return and help him deal with the 5-star army once he finished his work. If he did not hear Guan Heng's words, these words would be very believable. But after knowing everything, Uehara Toda would not be so easily fooled. The 5-star army is indeed very overbearing. I am willing to listen to the shogun's orders and stall them here. But what? Seeing that they had succeeded, Nishitoshi asked in a very good mood. But before the army moves, the supplies have to go first. You have to give me some time to prepare. Uehara Toda purposely showed the look of a businessman. He was trying to bargain and gain some benefits for himself. Nishitoshi thought that he had seen through everything. As an opponent who would become his opponent sooner or later, he could not give him any benefits. He believed that once the 5-star army really came, Uehara Toda would know what to do without him giving anything. So he did not make any promises and instead acted as if he did not understand, saying that he would give Uehara Toda a few days to prepare before the battle. Nishitoshi was sent to the inn to rest, leaving Uehara Toda with a face full of anger. The other party did not even want to give him any money. Was he really going to commit suicide? At this moment he was already leaning towards Guan Heng's words. A day later, Dao Shao came. Along with him was the document that Ashikaga Yoshimasa had taken the initiative to assign Shanin Road to the 5-star army. Guan Heng was very happy when he saw this document. Haha, with this, Uehara Toda will not know what to do. How about this? I will go see him tomorrow morning. Captain Dao, you have been busy for a long time, so you should rest first. No need, we still have a mission. Where is Nishitoshi staying? Dao Shao said very energetically without the slightest bit of fatigue from the long journey. Daemon Inn. Where Nishitoshi stayed. To be exact, this was Uehara Toda's property. Whenever a friend came, he would arrange for them to stay here. In Uehara Toda's territory, and in his inn, Nishitoshi never thought that he would be in any danger here. But when a short knife was placed in front of his neck, he woke up from his dream. He instinctively thought that Uehara Toda wanted to deal with him, so he immediately begged for mercy in Japanese. He also said that he had a lot of money and as long as he could spare his life he was willing to take it all out. If it was a normal person who was looking for money he might have a chance when faced with these words. Unfortunately he was facing Dao Xiao, so everything was a different story. As the second captain of Long Wei, Dao Xiao estimated that Yang Chendong's people were treated well, and many people could only look up to him. Yang Chendong used people based on their ability and at the same time he valued loyalty even more. If a person's character was not good, then no matter how capable they would not enter his eyes. In terms of using people, Yang Chendong was very clear that words alone were not enough to have an absolute effect. They also needed to have a guarantee of living conditions. Therefore, every Long Wei person's monthly salary was high enough to support a family of 50 people. In his own words, if you want people to work for you, how can you be stingy when it comes to money? This was also why people with ability were sharpening their brains to enter Long Wei. Not only did it give them face but it also gave them money. Dao Xiao was one of the people who enjoyed this kind of treatment, and he could be considered one of the people who benefited. Hearing Nishitoshi's words, he who had learned some Japanese said impatiently, "Shut up or I'll kill you right now." I'll shut up. Nishitoshi did not dare to speak. He could feel that the black-clothed man in front of him was full of murderous intent. What he said was not to scare him, but he really did not know how many people he had killed to give others such a feeling. The world quieted down and Dao Xiao finally continued with his work. To tell you the truth, as long as you listen to me I won't kill you. Now write a letter and copy the content. He took out a letter and threw it in front of Nishitoshi, who was kneeling on the ground. Hearing that he could not die, Nishitoshi's head nodded like a chicken eating food. Then he took out the letter and after reading it his face turned ugly. The content of the letter was not complicated. In his tone he said that Uehara Toda had reached an agreement with the 5-star army, and that they were ready to attack the great general together. After reading the content, Nishitoshi was sure that the black-clothed man in front of him was not an ordinary bandit. He was not here for money but for a purpose. Slowly raising his head, Nishitoshi wanted to ask about the identity of the black-clothed man, but before he could open his mouth, pain spread through his whole body. Then blood flowed down his neck and a fleshy ear appeared in Dao Xiao's hand. Pa! A broken ear was thrown in front of Nishitoshi, who wanted to scream but did not dare. He finally saw Dao Xiao's ruthless side, and he knew that everything just now was not a joke. He immediately lowered his head and looked for a pen and paper. Ningshi was very cooperative. In order to survive, he carefully read the letter after copying it. After making sure that there were no mistakes, he presented the letter to Dao Xiao with both hands with a flattering look on his face, as if he was trying to suck up to Dao Xiao. Logically speaking, he was also a talent. He had a glib tongue and could speak directly to people's hearts, which was why he was used by Ashikaga Yoshimasa. However, he was only good at talking. Although he had practiced martial arts before, it was not worth mentioning in front of Dao Xiao. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a scholar meeting a soldier. Chapter 1101. Everyone only had one life, and Nishitoshi didn't dare to gamble, nor did he dare to play any tricks. All he could do was to cooperate and gamble on the hope of survival. Obviously he lost the gamble. Dao Xiao's mission was to force Nishitoshi to write the letter and then kill him. This was an order from Yang Chendong himself, and all he had to do was to carry it out 100%. After receiving the letter and verifying that there was no mistake, he thrust the dagger forward and stabbed it into the heart made of flesh and blood. Ningshi was dead. Nishitoshi was dead. The body was found the next morning by a subordinate who came to deliver food to the room. The matter was quickly reported to Uehara Toda in the general's residence. But at this moment, General Uehara was meeting with Guan Xing, and the letter in his hand was written by the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself. It said that he took the initiative to give the Hokuriku to the 5-star army. After confirming that it was written by Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself, Uehara Toda couldn't help but curse angrily, "Bastard." This was equivalent to him being betrayed and becoming a part of the transaction. He always thought that he was someone important, but now it seemed that the Supreme General didn't even care about the 80,000 soldiers under his command. It could be imagined that once the five-star army was gone, the Supreme General would turn around and lead the army to destroy him. There was some heartache. The feeling of not being valued greatly hit Uehara Toda's self-confidence, and it also inspired him to have a greater idea of success. Guan Xing, who was sitting across from him, spoke at the right time. General Uehara, don't be too angry. In the end, people still need to rely on their strength to speak. If you don't have strength, you'll only harm yourself. What? Do you want to laugh at this, General? Uehara Toda, who was in a bad mood, said coldly, and there was even a trace of murderous aura around him. So what if you're the messenger of the five-star army? This is the Hokuriku, my headquarters. No one can act tough in front of me. The murderous aura was faintly discernible, but Guan Xing didn't seem to feel it. He still chuckled and said, General, you misunderstand. Since I'm here, of course I won't harm you. On the contrary, I'm here to give you a gift. Gift? What gift? Uehara Toda's face had a trace of confusion, and looking closely there was a trace of vigilance. There had to be something fishy going on. He didn't believe that the five-star army, who had no relation to him, would give him such a big gift. There might be some kind of trap. Guan Xing's next words made him realize that he had been overthinking things. The five-star army was indeed going to give him a big gift, but he had to fight for it himself. Because according to Guan Xing, his so-called gift was only a way for him to move forward. General, our Bugnam of Gojoseon said that he doesn't want to get involved in your internal strife. If it wasn't for the fact that Princess Junko has become the 8th madam, our five-star army wouldn't even want to get involved in your Japanese Empire's affairs. All of this is just to give the princess an explanation. Next, they just need to go to Ping in Beijing and take back the palace. The five-star army's goal will be achieved and they will stop. And unless someone provokes them, they will turn a blind eye to the internal strife of the Japanese Empire. As soon as Guan Xing's words fell, Uehara Toda chuckled. Emissary, you clearly want to watch us fight among ourselves so that we can disintegrate without a single soldier. General, you're wrong. What I said just now can be announced to the world in the form of a document. To be honest, if you really want to do something to the general, the 80,000 soldiers in your hands may not be enough. Guan Xing's tone also became a lot more serious. Negotiations are like this. It's not advisable to blindly use force or soft tactics. Only by using both can you achieve your goal. Being looked down upon again, Uehara Toda's temper rose. He stared fiercely at Guan Xing, and it looked like he would ask someone to kill the person in front of him at any time. But before he could speak, footsteps came from outside the room. A guard walked in without permission with an anxious look on his face. Originally, Uehara Toda wanted to scold his subordinate for not following the rules, but when he saw the anxious look on his face, Uehara Toda knew something was wrong and asked, "What happened?" "General, things are not good." The guard walked forward and told Uehara Toda about Nayui Toxiu's death in his room. When Uehara Toda received the news, his expression changed again and again. Suddenly, he looked fiercely at Guan Xing and said, "Nayui Toxiu is dead. Did you send someone to do it?" "This is really bad news, but I really didn't send someone to do it." Guan Xing looked surprised, then spread his hands and didn't admit it. Originally, he didn't give the order. Everything was Yang Qindong's idea. Seeing that Guan Xing still didn't want to get involved at this time, Uehara Toda said angrily, "What? Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you if you don't admit it? Let me tell you, this is not the barracks of the five-star army, this is my general's mansion." "Hehe, of course I know that this is the general's mansion and I know that the general can kill me with a casual order, but will you really do this? Nayui Toxiu is dead and the general's side has become your enemy. Something happens to me now, the five-star army will come. I really want to ask General Uehara, are your 80,000 soldiers really made of iron?" Guan Xing wasn't a pushover. Since things had already come to this point, he had no way out, so he might as well tell the serious consequences. Guan Xing went all out and showed his trump card as if he wasn't afraid of death. This time it was Uehara Toda's turn to be stunned. Originally, he wanted to take advantage of both sides, even if he saw the general's handwritten letter, so what? He never expected that the other party would treat him sincerely. The two sides could only use each other. Being used by the other party at least meant that he was valuable. As long as he handled it well, he might be able to get benefits from it and continue to watch the tigers fight on the mountain. But now Nayui Toxiu was dead and he died in his own territory. Once the general knew about this, would he forgive him? As for Guanxing, although his current behavior was very infuriating, as long as he still had a bit of intelligence, he wouldn't touch this person. What kind of joke was this? If he really killed Guanxing, it would be the same as igniting a fire on himself. At that time, it was very likely that the general and the 5-star army would join forces to destroy him first. Don't think that there wasn't such a possibility. In the face of huge benefits, anything was possible. If you didn't dare to think about it, it would only prove that you were stupid and you would be eliminated. Forcing himself to calm down, Uehara Toda looked at Guanxing with a bit of admiration in his eyes. Honorable envoy, if I lead the army to attack Ashikaga Yoshimasa now, what kind of help can you give me? At this time, Guanxing seemed to have changed into a different person. He was no longer as impulsive as before. His face regained a smile and said, "The 5-star army will send troops with you, General. We will send troops to Ping in Beijing and take it down. At the same time, I can assure you that unless there is an army in Shan'in Road that provokes the 5-star army, we will definitely not send troops there. There will only be one master here, and that is you, General Uehara." Whether it was a promise or a guarantee, at least the words were comfortable to listen to. Uehara Toda also knew that it was very difficult for the 5-star army to make such a promise in such a situation. Because now he had no other choice. Other than finding a way to defeat Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he could only stay in place and wait for the other party to take the initiative to attack him. When that time came, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have the slightest chance of winning. Sooner or later they would have to fight, so it was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. While the Flatwell Field was still fighting with the great general in Vietnam, he could take the initiative to send troops, and he could have one more ally, which would increase his chances of winning. Okay, I hope the honorable envoy will remember your promise. I need you to write what you just said into a document and then announce it to the world. Uehara Toda stood up. At this time he was ready to send troops. No problem, then I wish you, General Uehara, to win every battle and be invincible, huh? Guanxing also stood up. He knew that this time he had completed the task given to him by the 6th young master. He had made a great contribution. Thank you for your kind words. Uehara Toda also laughed. He couldn't wait to see how powerful the great general's army was, and what kind of sparks would be created when the two sides collided on the battlefield. Since he had decided to send troops, of course he couldn't have any hesitation. It was a taboo for a general to be indecisive. In just 3 days, 20,000 vanguard troops set off from the Shan'in Road, along the edge of Ping in Beijing to the Hokuriku Road, and rushed behind the great general. When the news reached the 5-star army's camp, Yang Qindong patted the desk and shouted, and then said to Beta Persei beside him, "Give the order, everything will be done according to the plan." Yes, young master. Beta Persei was also very excited and turned around to make the arrangements. Orders were sent out from the radio and spread to all directions. The armies, which had long been prepared for battle, were like dark clouds covering the moon, pressing towards the Japanese Empire's Kyoto, Ping and Beijing. In the Hokuriku Roads, Vietnam. After several fierce battles, Ashikaga Yoshimasa won another battle with the help of his troops that were several times more numerous than the other side, and finally occupied this area. According to the news, Flatwell Field only retreated to Ekigo Prefecture with 20,000 people. The great general who occupied Ekigo and Ekigo prefectures in succession was full of righteousness. The powerful strength he showed also deterred some small warlords and small forces who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to send troops to take advantage of him. As long as he occupied Ekigo Prefecture, even if he didn't capture Flatwell Field alive, the situation would be settled. At that time he could spare some time to deal with the 5-star army. He wanted to let everyone see that in the Japanese Empire he, the great general, was the most capable person, and this place would eventually belong to him. Chapter 1102. Ashikaga Yoshimasa hadn't even fully digested the news of victory when a letter personally written by Ninji Toshihida appeared in front of him. Then his face turned from green to red to white and finally became as black as charcoal. Uehara Toshiru of the mountain and village actually joined forces with the 5-star army, and it looked like they were going to attack him. This person only had 80,000 troops. Did he eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts? With only 80,000 people he dared to attack his 500,000 troops? General Maori regularization was in the big tent at the moment, waiting for the Supreme General's orders, and was lucky enough to see this letter. He also said with a puzzled face, "Supreme General, could Nishi Toshiru have been deceived?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa understood the meaning of Maori regularization's words and asked, "Are you saying that this news is false?" It's not that I doubt Nishi Toshiru's news, but it really doesn't make sense. Who is Uehara Toshiru? He's famous for being slippery. How could he make an enemy out of the great general for no reason? Mao Li Zheng said seriously as if he was discussing the matter. But only he knew in his heart that he didn't like Nishi Toshiru. The two of them were the Supreme General's right-hand men, and it was common for them to secretly fight. If there was a chance, of course, he wouldn't mind stepping on them. It makes sense. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who also didn't understand, nodded lightly and said, "In this case, arrange people to go to the mountain and village again to see Nishi Toshiru and see what's going on." Because of confidence, Ashikaga Yoshimasa never put Uehara Toshiru in his eyes, and he didn't think that he would take the initiative to attack him, so he didn't make any defensive preparations. Everything didn't change until 3 days later. In the main tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa summoned his generals and daimyos, and was discussing how to send troops to Ekigo Prefecture and how to kill Flatwell Field. Suddenly, a scout came into the tent with a panicked face. He knelt on the ground with an ugly face and handed over a letter in his hand. When the scout rushed into the tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa felt that something was wrong. When he took the letter and read it, he only felt that his vision turned black. He forced himself to stand up and slammed the desk in front of him and said, "Baka. Uehara Toshiru 5-star army, damn it." This roar also startled the other generals. Maori regularization was the first to react, took the letter on the desk and read it. Then his face turned ugly and said, clenching his fists and said, "Supreme General, didn't you say that Matsumoto Kazuma is dead? How could he stand up and accuse us?" Throwing Maori regularization a supercilious look, Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't know what was going on. It was just that the matter had already happened and it was no longer the time to worry about this problem. The most important thing was how to deal with the current complicated situation. The letter had already said that the 5-star army was attacking Ping in Beijing, and they used powerful firearms. The city couldn't hold on any longer. Also, Uehara Toshiru had sent troops along the edge of Ping in Beijing to Ekigo Prefecture. Fortunately, when he received Nishi Toshiru's letter, he sent someone to remind the troops guarding there, so when they were attacked they didn't have the power to fight back. But after all, they didn't make a sufficient plan, so they might be able to hold on for a while, but it became a fact that they couldn't hold on. Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't expect that the situation that seemed to be favorable to him would suddenly change so much. His face became quite ugly. After a while, he forcibly suppressed his anger and began to analyze the situation rationally. "I'm afraid that Ping in Beijing won't be able to hold on. Since that's the case, immediately arrange for Fukada Tani to stay there, and let him save his strength and retreat first. As for Uehara Toshiru, I'll leave it to General Maori. I'll give you 100,000 troops. Do you have the confidence to defeat him?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't give up and continued to move forward. He wanted to capture Ekigo Prefecture and completely defeat the Flatwell Field. In his eyes, the other forces in the country were nothing to be afraid of. Only this person was proficient in both the pen and the sword. If he didn't get rid of him, he would be a big problem in his heart. "Yes, General, please rest assured this subordinate will definitely complete the task." Leading an army of 100,000 troops, Maori regularization's eyes were full of excitement and excitement. Good, the other plans remain unchanged. The main force of the army will continue to move to Ekigo Prefecture. The others will do what they should do. In short, this is the Japanese Empire, we won't lose. At the end of the meeting, Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't forget to cheer everyone up. At this time his eyes also showed a sense of determination but also a sense of resentment. This time he was schemed against by the 5-star army and Uehara Toshiru. He will remember this hatred and one day he will get his revenge. Ping in Beijing outskirts. At this moment, it has all become the territory of the 5-star army. When Yang Qindong's order was issued, the 4th Division and the 7th Army, who had been waiting here for a long time, launched a fierce attack on the Japanese army outside Ping in Beijing with 100mm mortars. The cannonballs that fell from the sky caught the Neon troops who were guarding there off guard. Fukada Tani, who was in charge of the defense of Ping and Beijing, felt great pressure in the situation where he couldn't even see where the enemy was. After half an hour of continuous artillery fire, they basically destroyed the anti-cavalry weapons, and even the formation of the army was in chaos. The soldiers didn't know their generals and the generals didn't know their soldiers. At this time, there was a huge tremor on the ground and the cavalry of the 5-star army began to attack. With the 1st Cavalry Division in the lead and the cavalry of the new 3 armies as support, there were more than 40,000 people in total. Looking from afar, it was as if a black tornado was rushing over, pressuring toward them. This horrifying scene in the eyes of Daimyo Fukadaya, he could not help but tremble all over. He had long heard that the cavalry of the 5-star army was very powerful, and that they could compete with the people on horseback, the descendants of the Mongolians and the grassland cavalry, or even more powerful. For this reason, Fukada Tani not only prepared a lot of anti-cavalry stakes, but also enough bows and arrows. He wanted to give this cavalry a head-on attack and let them know how powerful he was. But now, when he really faced the cavalry of the 5-star army, he knew that the rumors were true. Just the momentum of this attack made people feel powerless. Not to mention that all of his preparations were already destroyed by the artillery fire. Block, block. Fukada Tani's heart was filled with fear, but his mouth was very tough. He called out the names of a few of his subordinates, and ordered them to block the cavalry of the 5-star army, while he himself led the main force to retreat to Ping and Beijing. He wanted to defend the high city, and these soldiers were left behind to buy time for his army to retreat. Charge. Kill. On the sturdy warhorse, Tian, who held his sword in one hand, and with the other hand he constantly made all kinds of hand gestures to command the cavalry to advance. With him as the leader, the arrow point formation was the first to meet the enemy, and then like a drill they drilled into the enemy camp. As soon as they entered the enemy camp, Tian, who held his sword with both hands, and relying on his body's balance technique, he was as natural as sitting on a brick bed in his own house. Under his steady body, the 2 swords continuously slashed forward and to the side. The soldiers of the Japanese Empire were like scarecrows in training. In a short period of time he had advanced more than 100 meters and unexpectedly no one was his match and no one was able to block his charge. Like Tian, who, the other commanders and the arrow point formation of the arrow point formation were also doing the same thing. Wherever they went no one was their match. Some of them were only wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, some of them were only severed limbs, and some of them were only covered by the enemy's head and fled. For commanders, a total of 8,000 soldiers of the Japanese Empire were quickly penetrated. In addition to a large amount of blood on the ground, there were densely packed soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. They were frightened by the powerful combat power of the 5-star army cavalry, and when they discovered that those who resisted were quickly decapitated, their fighting spirit began to collapse. More and more soldiers put down their dignity and knelt on the ground, becoming prisoners of war who had no dignity on the battlefield but could live on. Continue to charge. The 6th young master has ordered us to quickly take Ping and Beijing, and we can't give the enemy any time to breathe. Major General Tian, who rode on his horse. After penetrating the enemy's defense system, he spurred his horse forward and continued to lead the cavalry towards the capital of Ping and Beijing. Ping and Beijing was the capital of the Japanese Empire. Although it was far less majestic than some of the cities in the Great Ming Dynasty because of its conditions, it still had its own unique characteristics. This place was about to become his territory. If possible, Yang Qindong didn't want to destroy it too much. That was why he gave the order to the cavalry before the attack. It would be best if they could storm into the city with lightning speed, but if they couldn't they were to retreat first and leave everything to the 4th Division and the 7th Army's 2 firearms divisions. Yang Qindong had given him hope, so Tian, who naturally had to follow the best goal. Before the battle had even begun, he had already called over the 5 captains under him and expressed his stance. We are the 1st Cavalry Division, the most powerful existence in the 5-star army. Now is the time to prove ourselves. Do you all have the confidence to complete the mission? Yes. The 5 commanders all stood in the most standard military posture and replied. This was the reason why they were in front of them. They were completely unsatisfied with defeating the Japanese army and occupying the periphery of Ping and Beijing. Their goal was to storm into the city and make a great contribution. In the rear, Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 4th Division, and Tian Su, the commander of the 7th Army, used binoculars to watch the 1st Cavalry Division continuously advance forward. When they put down the binoculars, the two commanders rubbed their eyes and revealed an incredulous expression. At this moment their inner thoughts were extremely unified. The 1st Cavalry Division was the 1st Division and they were worthy of this name. They were like madmen on the battlefield, invincible. They actually did as the 6th young master said and were about to storm into Ping and Beijing without the support of their artillery. Chapter 1103. The time to sigh was very short. The changes on the battlefield were often abnormal, so it was impossible to give the commander more time to think. All soldiers, listen to my order. Run and keep up. Charge into Ping and Beijing and occupy the capital of Hainan. Charge into Ping and Beijing and occupy the capital of Hainan. The two division commanders couldn't let Tianhu take all the credit. They also wanted a share of the pie. Thus they broke their original plan of waiting and watching. They began to speed up and run forward. The new army commander Su He also had the same idea. He was once a general of the Tatar tribe, and had competed with Tianhu for the position of commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Seeing that his brother's cavalry didn't stay on the battlefield and continued to charge forward, he gritted his teeth and said, 4th Cavalry Division, stay behind and clean up the battlefield. The other 3 divisions follow me and charge forward. Charge. The original plan of fighting steadily was completely changed. Under the leadership of Major General Tianhu, tens of thousands of 5-star army soldiers gave up on the steady rhythm and changed to charging forward. It seemed like they wouldn't stop until they entered Ping and Beijing. This made Fukada Tani, who was leading his troops to retreat, suffer. After running for a while he arrived at Ping and Beijing. When he turned around he saw that the 5-star army cavalry was less than 5 or 6 miles away from him. He immediately lost his mind. How dare you? Pointing angrily at the 1st Cavalry Division that was hot on his heels, Xianxia really wanted to reprimand them, and even more wanted to warn them that the capital of Peace City had solid walls. It was not a place where they could behave atrociously. Fukada Daimyo, let's enter the city first. Some of his subordinates saw that Fukada Tani was so angry that his face turned red. Although they were surprised by the arrogance of the 5-star army cavalry, they knew that they would only be safe if they entered the city. Shouting like this now was useless. All right, let's enter the city and order the soldiers to shoot arrows up the city walls. I would like to see if these cavalry can still fly up when faced with the solid city gates and city walls. Fukada Tani suppressed the anger in his heart. After saying this to his subordinates he turned around and entered Ping and Beijing. After that, the city gate closed from the inside, completely closing when the 1st Cavalry Division was about 700 to 800 meters away. Once the city gates were closed, it was as if all dangers were isolated from the outside world. The Japanese army soldiers inside the gate let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, more people rushed towards the two sides of the passage. They wanted to rush up the tower and use their bows and arrows to return fire. They wanted to let these arrogant 5-star army cavalry know the consequences of angering them. Major General Tianhu, who was charging forward with all his strength, watched as the south gate of Ping and Beijing was closed. His expression did not change at all. Since he wanted to attack Ping and Beijing in one go, he naturally made sufficient preparations before doing so. Where is the 1st Regiment commander? Tianhu slowed down the speed of his warhorse and turned around to ask. Commander, I'm here, Taimur answered loudly from dozens of meters behind him on the left. As the tip of another arrow, he had been following behind Tianhu the whole time, never leaving or abandoning him. When he saw Taimur and realized that he was very close to him, Tianhu's original serious expression changed. He laughed loudly and said, Very good, 1st Regiment commander. I'll leave the rest to you. Whether or not you can obtain the first merit will depend on your performance. Please rest assured, commander. Leave everything to the 1st Regiment, Taimur said with great ambition. Taimur said with great ambition. Then he suddenly tore open his jacket, revealing 4 black-headed wooden-handled grenades. Taimur was not the only one who did this. His entire team of about 30 people tore open their coats, revealing the tightly wrapped grenades. Their faces were filled with bloodthirsty murderous intent. This was a group of lunatics. They actually strapped grenades to their bodies during a battle. If there were any sparks or if the fuse was accidentally triggered, wouldn't there be a huge accident? But it had to be said that although they were crazy, they had succeeded. At least they had not encountered any accidents when they reached this place. And it was because of their risk that they now had the opportunity to break through the city gate. Teimu and the other 30 people were making preparations. Tian, who was not idle either. He rode his horse to the south gate of Ping in Beijing. He put away his dual swords and picked up his strong bow. He aimed at the top of the city gate tower and was ready to shoot at any time. Almost as soon as Tianhu and his cavalrymen knocked their bows and arrows, many small heads of the Japanese army popped out from the city gate tower. They also had their bows and arrows ready and were looking down, ready to shoot their targets. As soon as they popped their heads out, both sides looked at each other and saw clearly. Tianhu's voice was then heard. "Release the arrows. Don't let them interfere with the 1st Regiment commander and the others." Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The sound of arrows piercing through the air was incessant. The sharp arrows were shot directly at the Japanese army soldiers who had popped their heads out. In a moment of carelessness, dozens of Japanese army soldiers were shot. Some of them collapsed to the ground while others fell from the tall city gate tower. This scene also frightened the other Japanese army soldiers. They quickly shrank back, trying to stay alive like turtles. Fukada Tani, who had just arrived at the city gate tower, saw this scene. He immediately shouted angrily, "What are you afraid of? We have the high ground and we have the city gate as our defense. They should be the ones who are worried. Everyone return fire immediately. Return fire." Under the command of their general, the soldiers finally had a backbone. They were no longer as scared as before and could finally organize a decent counterattack. With the advantage of having the high ground, they caused a lot of trouble for the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division. They didn't have as many soldiers as the other side, and the terrain wasn't favorable to them. If it were any other army, they wouldn't take the risk to fight this battle. Even in front of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tianhu's expression was still cold. He immediately ordered the soldiers to take out their shields. 2 people in a group. 1 person with a bow and the other with a shield. We must create an opportunity for the 1st Regiment commander and the others to blow open the city gate. Tianhu's voice was very calm. It was obvious that this wasn't a temporary idea. In fact, the 1st Cavalry Division had also undergone such training in the past. It was to prevent such a situation from happening. The preparation came in handy. 2 soldiers formed a group. 1 person held a shield to protect himself and his comrades, while the other person held a bow to look for an opportunity to counterattack. Arrows fell like rain. There were nearly 10,000 Japanese Empire soldiers on the top of the southern city gate of Ping in Beijing. Even if each of them released an arrow, the momentum was enough to frighten people. Once the arrows fell from the sky and hit the cavalry below, it was like a torrential downpour. It was said that a chaotic fist could kill a master. Under the chaotic arrows, even the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division couldn't guarantee that they could escape unscathed. In less than half an hour, nearly 100 soldiers had been hit by arrows. Among them, more than 10 people had been hit in the vital areas and had already died. Hurry up, hurry up. Tian, who was very unwilling to see his brothers die in such a cowardly defense. When he turned to look at Teimu, his voice was filled with urgency. At this time, Teimu and the others had already removed all the grenades from their bodies and tied them together in groups of 4. After hearing his division commander's shout, Teimu was the first to charge. With his superb horse riding skills, he held a shield in one hand and the 4 grenades tied together in the other. He charged fiercely toward the southern city gate of Ping in Beijing. Yang Qindong had once issued an order in the army. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the regimental commander or officers above the regimental commander level were not allowed to charge at will. After all, it wasn't easy to train such a high-ranking officer. He didn't want these outstanding talents to die in the chaos of a charge. Since it was Yang Qindong's order, everyone had to carry it out unconditionally. This was the importance of core authority. However, this time Teimu broke this rule. Tianhu, who was watching all of this from a short distance, didn't stop him. This was because he knew very well that rules were dead but people were alive. The more critical the situation was, the more important it was for a general to stand up and set an example. Taimur took the lead and was the first to reach the city gate. When he reached the city gate, he threw the 4 grenades with their fuses already pulled out. Boom, 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 boom. Loud vibrations were heard. After a cloud of smoke, all the cavalrymen couldn't help but look toward the city gate. Unfortunately, it only covered the iron gate with a layer of black smoke. It didn't have much effect on the overall situation. Even grenades didn't work? It had to be said that the people of the Japanese Empire were very serious in their work. The quality of the city gate was really good. At the very least, it was beyond the expectations of the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry division. Don't stop. Keep going. As long as you keep blasting, there's nothing you can't break. Tian, who wasn't discouraged even though his attack didn't work. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought so many grenades in one go. Yes, continue. Taimur had just retreated. He was initially shocked by the lack of effect. Now that he heard Tianhu's words, he nodded vigorously and ordered the other soldiers to continue charging. The explosions weren't completely useless. On the city gate tower, the soldiers of the Japanese Empire felt a tremor under their feet. Some of the more timid ones had already squatted down and covered their heads. As the commanding general, Fukada Tani was indeed a little more courageous. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid. It was just that he woke up earlier than the others. Ah, did you see that? Firearms are useless against the city gate. Everyone, don't worry. Continue to shoot arrows at the city gate tower. We have to use this opportunity to kill more enemies and gain more merits. Fukada Tani was very active at this moment. Relying on the advantage of defending the city, Fukada Tani was already fantasizing about the scene where they could inflict heavy damage on the cavalrymen of the 5-star army and gain great merits. Below the southern city gate, bundles of grenades were still exploding. The seemingly thick iron gate finally showed signs of loosening under the continuous bombardment. For this, the world's #1 cavalry division had paid the price of hundreds of men. Although less than 100 of them were killed by the arrows, more than 300 of them were injured. Many of them had already lost their ability to fight. It was conceivable that after this battle, they wouldn't be able to recover to their peak and could no longer stay in the army. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.